Good evening, everyone. Let's try one more time. There is a full house in here. Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education special meeting with our employees, including DAE, is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to meet with our educators, including NCAE and DAE representatives, to discuss a structure for the board to hear from our employees. We do have two interpreters for tonight, Martha Romo Iguiles and Vanessa Piñet Ramirez. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. We do have a quorum of the board present, so we will be able to go ahead and get started. There is an agenda in our packets for this evening. Board, I'll ask if we want to approve the agenda. Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Rogers, seconded by Ms. Byers. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. I'm now going to turn the agenda over to our facilitator for the evening, Mr. Steve Schul. He is a beloved member of our community here in Durham, a former school board member as well as mayor, and we're excited for you to facilitate our conversation this evening.
Thank you so much, Bettina. I'm really glad to be here tonight. It's really an honor. I will say that when the vote just came up on approving the agenda, I did vote. I guess I'm just used to it. As I said, I'm really honored to be here. The chair and the vice chair asked me to facilitate this meeting, and I will do my best. Just want to say a few words. I'm not here to make policy. That's the board's role. And I'm not here as an advocate, as our DAE friends and others are. I'm here to try to land the plane, to help us work together tonight in a way that is constructive, mutually respectful, moves forward tonight's agenda concerning meet and confer, and allows employees' voices to be heard. I do want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting, although in some ways an unusual public meeting of the board, and we are operating under the state's open meetings laws. I just want to say I've spent today talking to a number of people, and especially I just wanted to say a couple of great young leaders, Bettina and Simone. When you get old, and you've been doing this for a while, it's really wonderful to think that you're passing Durham on to this amazing group of people represented here around this table and in this room. And I just am so grateful for you all. For tonight is another night to make Durham a great place for all of our children and all of us. I also want to welcome our interim superintendent to Durham. You've stepped into a tough job, and by all accounts, you're up to it. We're so glad you're here, and I want you to know that you have the support of everyone in this community, and you can call on any of us anytime you need us. Before I talk about the meeting, I want to talk about this little piece of plastic. It is not the coolest headphones in the room. It's a fan that I use because I'm taking some kind of heavy medicines, and about once an hour I get hot flashes. Some of you all may be familiar with them. If it happens, I use this fan. It's $30 on Amazon. But if you see me put it on, the only thing I will tell you it means is you need to talk a little louder, because while it's on, it does kind of make it a little harder for me. Every Durham resident, especially school children, school employees, and parents, has a stake in the work that we're doing here tonight. And I include myself in that number. I care deeply about Durham Public Schools. My kids went to Durham Public Schools K through 12. I had two at EK Poe. One went on to DSA. The other went on to Brogdon and Riverside. I served on the task force that merged Durham City and County schools into one system. I was a student teacher, and then I taught for 1 year at Jordan until I figured out that teaching was really too hard for me, and the newspaper business would be easier. I coached soccer for many years at Brogdon and Riverside, and can I just take a minute to say, roll, Pirates, roll? and I served for 4 years on the school board. To our teachers and classified workers here today, I offer my complete respect and appreciation. You have incredibly difficult jobs, and you do them day in, day out with such intense commitment to the education of our children. To our school board members, I offer that same respect and appreciation. I have been in your shoes, and I know how hard it is, and especially during the times like we've been through recently. And I just want to tell you how grateful that I am. So let's get to the agenda tonight. I want to go over it quickly. We've done the placard for the folks sitting here at the table. In a minute, we're going to do introductions around the table. Opening remarks by me. I know that should have said awesome after it, but that's okay. The DAE then the folks here at the table will make a presentation of community agreements and shared values that you all are proposing. And we will then have a discussion of that. And we want to talk about the values that we all share. Then the DAE will make a presentation on meet and confer, which is really the heartbeat of the meeting tonight. And then there will be a discussion on that. Then we will ask our transportation mechanics, fleet maintenance and supervisors, and lot managers, any of them who might be here tonight, to come to the microphone. And we want to also really make sure that we hear the concerns that you have. And so that will follow that. And then we will offer public comment to anyone else who would like to make public comment after that at that time. Finally, we will talk about how to move forward best with meet and confer, appointment of a working group, timeline, consideration of other employees' input to the board. And then we will have closing remarks by the board members. It says 3 minutes each, but who knows? Maybe by the time we get there, they'll only want to speak for 1 minute. We'll find out. And then adjournment. That's our agenda. My hope is to end this meeting by 8:30. That means that all of us need to respect the time of others when we speak, and I'll try to manage the time so that we meet that deadline. I won't be unhappy if we leave earlier, and I doubt that you will either. As we talk to each other, with each other tonight, I have a few things I'd like all of us to keep in mind. First of all, let's try to listen to each other deeply, listen to understand, and listen with an open mind. Let's try to put aside our preconceptions about each other, especially our negative preconceptions. And so just for a second, try to let that little door open in your mind. I'm doing it in mine, so that we can all think together about how we're going to be open to each other. Let's all try to assume positive intent on the part of everyone in the room. Let's try to assume the best of each other and expect that others will assume the best of us. Let's try to practice genuine mutual respect, and let's be kind to each other. We meet in fraught times for the district and for the board, for our new interim superintendent, for our employees, and for our families who desperately want to get their kids back to school on the regular. It's in these times especially that we need to show each other kindness and grace. I will try to offer that, and I hope that you will too. And finally, let's share the microphone. I'll try to help us do that by moving the meeting along as best I can and by gently nudging folks who may be holding the mic a bit too long. So those are the things that I have to say. And now let's go ahead and begin with our agenda. Yeah, thank you, Tina. The first thing we're going to do is just introductions of people at the table, and simply names would be great. And everyone's, yeah, thank you. What we're going to do, we're going to use first names tonight around the table. Okay. Yeah. I'm Steve Schul. And if you want to say your pronouns, he, him.
Natalie Vire, she, her. Jessica Carter Otten, she, her.
Millicent Rogers, she, her.
Riley Finnegan, he, him.
Micah Hunter Tweetmeyer, she, her. Sonia Tallheimer, she, her.
Millie Rosen, she, her.
Carlos Perez, he, him.
Asia Pope, she, her. Simone Cadu, she, her.
Christy Patterson, she, her. Kalitha Vinson, she, her.
Turquoise Lejeune Parker, she, her.
Quentin Hedden, he, him.
Anna Benfield, she, her.
Rachel Sulin, she, her.
Nicholas King, he him.
Kathy Moore, she, her.
Javanya Lewis, she, her.
Emily Chavez, she, her.
And Bettina Umstead, she, her.
Thank you all so much. And now we're going to have our DAE friends present their community agreements and shared values. And we will, after that, we'll discuss them. So I'm not sure who's leading off.
That would be me. So we recognize that you all have a set of norms that guide your practice and create expectations for our audience in a public meeting. But as partners in this meeting, we wanted to offer the union's community agreements as we have folks in this space specifically as union members. So our community agreements are voted on by our elected body, and we ask for regular feedback about them to ensure our spaces are functional, equitable, and take care of our folks. They are the first being in this together. None of us will get what we need by acting alone. Our organization is committed to building collective power to win the schools and communities we all deserve. And part of building collectively is caring for one another in agreement and in disagreement. And we can use these community agreements as guideposts for principled discussion. The next is move up, move back. Usually move up, move back in our spaces is about a commitment to an equity of voice and asking folks to be mindful of how often they are sharing and calling in representation of other voices. We make concerted efforts to not only invite in, but uplift views and voices that are not often represented in the room because our union is sharper when we hear a broad representation of us. In this situation, this meeting doesn't create more space for union members to engage in live debate. However, the folks at this table are folks who have demonstrated a commitment to representing and being accountable to their coworkers across DPS.
The third point, respect and support facilitation. We are committed to starting on time and ending on time out of respect for everyone's attention and labor. We are also committed to adhering to the structures created by board policy for a work session. We do, however, want our folks to be as involved as possible in this process. We have member leaders who are supporting our parking lots, collecting feedback, questions, concerns that workers have about the policy or the deliberation. Our leadership bodies are committed to following up with any notes placed in the parking lot to either answer the question, resolve the issue, or identify a person avenue to find resolution. We are also committed to coming together, prepared to engage in principled struggle, work together, and take action together. And we take our work seriously. Part of taking our work seriously is respecting the agenda and structures of the space to address the full agenda on our plates today. The next one, apologies are reserved for harm. The stories that we learn about ourselves and others through the traumatic experience of sexism and racism can show up in different ways in a group spaces, including apologizing or attempting to give qualifiers for our responses, questions, or existence. This is a space to learn in a different way of being, rejecting those narratives and living fully into ourselves. It also means when harm has been done, we should recognize that harm that was done, apologize for it, and identify next steps to move forward in repair. Repair does not mean it's okay or no big deal. It means thank you for your apology. To move forward, I would like if we could, and then name what you need. It may just be move forward as colleagues or friends, and that's fine.
So we don't want to just assume that just because Chrissy and I said these things in the room that you all are agreeing to them. So if we could get a thumbs up from folks, if they can agree to those community agreements. And if you have questions, Brian is standing back there to answer those questions. Great. I'm noticing the majority of the room is sharing a set of expectations for how they want this meeting to go, and we collectively will be responsible for each other. So we wanted to start with a conversation about what we understand to be our values, and then also the shared values between the union, the Durham Association of Educators, you all as a board, and the broader community. So the first is our students' learning conditions are our working conditions. Our union work is centered around improving the outcomes for students, and we know as public school workers, we have a major impact on the life outcomes of the next generation. Because of institutional sexism and racism, our society treats the work of raising the next generation as unskilled labor that doesn't deserve to be well compensated. We know that everyone in this room disagrees with that and suffers from that disrespect. And we want to collaborate with all of you to make Durham a place where the work of raising the next generation is even more clearly respected and valued. We firmly believe that our students deserve the absolute best. And that includes resourced educators that can attend to our students' needs. And in order to stay in this skilled, complex, and respectable profession, live in Durham, and be present for our students, we and all of our coworkers need working conditions that work for us.
This is new to me. We understand that the board, the district, and our community also deeply value collaboration, transparency, and accountability. This policy and opportunity for meet and confer lives into those values, creating a collaborative process for workers. Not close enough. Okay, thank you. Okay. Through the employee representative to lead with district administration and the board to create the schools we all deserve. In its design, it creates structures for accountability, not just on the side of the district, but also on our side as the employee representative to our broader community to problem solve the issues facing our schools and students. And does this work in a very public and transparent fashion that allows every employee and community member and caregiver invested in public schools to access information about the well-being of our school system. What we have a chance to do here today together is to bring our district more in line with these shared values than it has ever been. That's how we can restore trust and go even further and make this a district where talented staff stay for their careers and help solve problems, and where students get a better education as a result.
Thank you very much. And I think that what we should do now, and let me just ask Rachel and Simone, these values have been created in the same process that you described earlier for the community norms. Is that correct?
Our students' learning conditions are our working conditions is one that has existed within the union for maybe decades. At this point, it does not start in Durham. It has a long history within the labor movement in other states, particularly in the education labor movement. And then the three of collaboration, transparency, and accountability are ones that are seated within the planks that built the policy that our members voted on and reflect things that we have heard the board members share as being important and seem important to the district broadly.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to now ask the board members a couple of, can we leave I look fantastic there, I know, but it's not my best side is the problem. So thank you. Thank you for just a hey to the tech folks. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate you. These values, I think we should do two things. What we're looking for is mutually held values, values that all of the people around this table hold. These are values that the folks in DAE have put forward as important values to them. So I think maybe what we should do, I'm proposing this, is that we first talk about these values and talk about whether or not you all feel like you're aligned with them. And then if there are any other values that board members want to put forward as something that you think is important, and then we can do that and discuss them. So if everybody's okay with that, let's just start with our student learning conditions or our working conditions. Any board members have a comment, a thumb up, any thoughts to offer about this? I see some thumbs. Okay. Anybody have any comments to offer? I'm taking that as, I think I won't take that. Is everybody on the board comfortable with that as an important shared value? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Then collaboration. I'm going to assume, but I'm assuming that that's a shared value, but let me just ask, everybody want to give that a thumb up? Okay, great. Transparency, same. Anybody have any problems with that as an important value? Great. And accountability. Let's hear a little bit more from, I'd like to hear a little bit more from the, I think accountability is a little trickier than collaboration and transparency. So maybe either any of you all want to say a little bit more about the accountability value and the way that you see that? Is how, it's mutuality. Any thoughts that anyone wants to offer from the DAE folks?
Sure. I know for us, when we are sitting at this table, when folks who are sitting at this table who are elected in the union, and just for rank and file members generally, the way that we approach our work is to be not only accountable to our coworkers, but accountable for the students that we serve every single day, for the caregivers that send them to our schools every single day, for the community members that support our schools every single day. And we take that very seriously. And we don't ever want to approach a conversation speaking as DAE members from an individualistic lens. We want to be grounded in the experiences of our students and our coworkers.
Thank you. When I think about accountability in this discussion, I also think about this mutual accountability that we have at this table. That the description that you gave of accountability within your union, I think we need to think about it more broadly here tonight. That we all share mutual accountability for this work. And I know we're going to, and we're going to do a great job. Everybody comfortable with accountability as a value? Okay. All right. So thank you all for those. Those are great and much appreciated, and I appreciate the board's response. Does anyone on the board want to offer another value that you think might be a value that we might all mutually hold? Anybody? Okay, I'm going with those. Thank you so much. I appreciate that presentation, and I think those are very important values and ones that will serve us well tonight. And now we're going to talk into the DAE presentation on Meet and Confer, and you all do it. Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
Good evening, everybody. That's right. I'll take a page out of Bettina's book and say one more time, good evening. All right. So my name is Carlos Perez. As I said earlier, I'm a social studies teacher over at Jordan High School, where I've been teaching history, sociology, and Latin American studies for the last 7 years. And I'm going to be speaking briefly to sort of who DAE is, what we do, how we do it, and why DAE is a natural fit for Meet and Confer. And just to start us off, as far as what the Durham Association of Educators is, in the simplest terms, we're a labor union for all public school workers in Durham Public Schools. And that seems straightforward, but if you go to school districts in other parts of the country, you might find 1, 2, maybe 3 different unions operating in the same district, in the same school building, representing different subsets of workers. But in DAE, whether you clean the floors, drive a bus, feed our kids, teach math, science, history, whatever, DAE represents all workers in Durham Public Schools. So it's worth underlining from the outset because it's distinct from the way that educators unions operate in other parts of the country. DAE is also a local affiliate of the North Carolina Association of Educators at the state level. And we are also affiliated with the National Education Association at the national level, which is the largest union in the country. In terms of who our membership is, as I mentioned, we represent all workers. That includes both classified and certified workers throughout the district. And our growing membership, and it's been growing rapidly this year, it proportionately represents both job classifications and very much so the diversity that we see across Durham Public Schools. We can get the next slide. So in terms of how we do our work on a day-to-day, the union is governed democratically by an elected board of directors. So I'm the at-large director on the board of directors. But as far as the campaigns that are carried out, whether it's at the building level or at the district level, we have a broad organizing structure that both covers schools and then covers the entire district. So we have a district organizing committee for district level campaigns. We have an organizing committee at the building level, and whether it's at the district level or at a building level, these campaigns are aimed at touching every single worker in the building. So just to give everyone a taste, I work at the largest school in Durham Public Schools. Jordan has over 180 plus employees. And in response to the classified pay debacle, we were able to talk to over 75% of the staff within a number of days. And it got up to 100 very quickly. And across the district, within a matter of 2 weeks, we were able to speak to more than 3,000 workers across the district. And I think that alone, amongst other things, speaks to why it makes most sense to have DAE here at the table for this meet and confer process. We are the only organization that is capable of efficiently and effectively reaching all workers across the districts, tapping into their needs, desires, the issues that they're facing on a day-to-day basis, because those are the same issues that we are facing on a day-to-day basis. And DAE is not only leading here in Durham as far as the movement to defend and transform public schools, we are very much leading the state. I know a number of you were around during May 16th. Oftentimes, other educators around the state are looking to Durham for what those next steps are. And I think us sitting here at this table talking about meet and confer is a reflection of that. And as was said already, I just flipped it a little bit, but our working conditions are students' learning conditions. So to the extent that we take that seriously, we got to sit down at the table and hash this out. So thank you.
So for the rest of the presentation, we wanted to walk through the policy purpose and goals, and then we took pieces of the policy and grouped them together by the common values lens. And so we'll talk about the different pieces of the policy based off of collaboration and then accountability and transparency, and then we'll kick it to questions and answers.
I'm Kalitha Vinson. I'm the AIG specialist at Moorhead Montessori. I am going to talk to the purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to develop a policy that will establish a meet and confer process. We hope to mutually develop a policy that the Board of Education will formally adopt. Through meet and confer, DPS workers and administrators will collaboratively develop and improve policies and policy implementation.
Thanks, Kalitha. I'm Sonia. This policy will benefit everyone in the Durham community through collaboration with workers, administrators, and the Board of Education. Like was said earlier, like we've said many times, our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. So as we improve Durham Public Schools and work sites for workers, that will improve student performance and outcomes. This policy will support with retaining Durham Public Schools staff and attracting highly qualified workers to join Durham Public Schools.
I'm Asia. I'm going to talk to you about the importance of transparency within the policy next. Transparent.
Asia, excuse me one second. Tell us where you work and what you do.
Oh, I work at Lions Farm Elementary and I'm an IA.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, one sec. AJ, if you could just get the mic closer. Folks who are streaming can't hear us when we don't use the microphone. So that's the only point. Want to make sure people can watch.
We're going to talk to you about the importance of transparency within the policy next. Transparency is a really important component because it allows for better practices and allows for relevant information to be shared with everyone who needs to access it. For instance, the last couple of weeks, we've been asking for and still not have received a state fund budget versus actuals, nor have we received the frequency counts for who is at what pay grade. Without these, excuse me, it has been impossible for us to really engage with the district and impossible to really engage with our coworkers in a discussion on the pay resolutions. If we had access to these pieces of information, we'll be better able to brainstorm with our coworkers about possibilities and next steps, and better set up to communicate with the Board of Ed regarding these issues. So it is clear that a meet and confer, and specifically this transparency piece, would be really improved for this current moment. In the future, transparency will be will be crucial for many reasons. First, and timely and equal access to information for administration and employees will allow the meet and confer team to make a well-informed recommendation to the board based on consultations with our coworkers.
Thanks, Asia. I'm going to keep talking about transparency. We'll be better able to craft our campaigns and have them be based in the same understanding of the financial landscape that the district has. The adoption of a Board of Education Advisory Council establishes an open meeting on budget, personnel, and student learning topics, inviting public support and feedback. Furthermore, some issues will be solved just by the ability to obtain information. Employee trust in the district would increase by making it easier for employees to get our questions answered in a timely way. Finally, the utilization of an employee representative organization helps to ensure that the decisions the Board of Education makes, the policy implications from those decisions, and the background information the Board of Education uses are fully transparent. This promotes accountability, trust, and collaboration.
Christy, ECE, Special Programs Teacher at Carrington Middle School. In addition to transparency, another core value to meet and confer process is collaboration. I'm going to talk about 3 areas where we think there are great opportunities for labor management collaboration. The first is the issue of what topics are welcome to be discussed in meet and confer sessions. Essentially, we propose that all school-related matters are welcome topics for discussion because of how important it is for employees to have a voice on the great variety of things that impact students' learning conditions. You'll see on the slide that this covers issues like compensation, but also things like professional development, workload, and district-wide initiatives. We also welcome the Board of Education to introduce other topics into the discussion. Of course, we would also collaborate on prioritization. This is maybe an overwhelming list of possible topics, but to be clear, we are committed to working together with the Board of Education to determine which topics would be of the highest priority for each meet and confer session.
So we want to work together with the district administration to problem solve the issues facing our public schools. That partnership would include developing the agendas together referenced in H subsection A, composed of topics previously named on that other slide, and creating a path to recommend resolutions to the Board of Education to consider for policy adoption. So Jessica, I heard you name in the February 2nd meeting that decisions that we make together, we are then responsible for together, and we share that sentiment. So you all would receive policy recommendations that have been deeply informed by the voices and experiences of employees on the front lines of our school system and assessed for validity and factual reliance by numerous experts before being submitted for your consideration. So the last opportunity for collaboration that we want to highlight is the creation and maintenance of a meet and confer team. This is also an opportunity to practice accountability, which two of our coworkers will address in a moment. The composition of the meet and confer team reaffirms our commitment to the shared values of collaboration and transparency. It calls for equal membership from the employee representative organization and from the district referenced in B subsection A. Equal representation recognizes that DPS employees are on the front lines, bring expertise from our school sites or work sites, and have the responsibility in the DPS community for executing the goals and missions of our public schools. Equal representation also recognizes the critical value and unique bird's eye view perspective of central leadership, something that we deeply value in our organization. The team is tasked with sharing leadership between employees and the administration for the purpose of problem solving and developing quality proposals that improve student learning conditions district-wide. DAE is a democratic member-funded organization that elects its leadership with one member, one vote. We work hard to make sure that as many worker voices as possible can be heard, both to not leave people out and to not make the mistake of putting extra weight or importance on a particular perspective just because one person happens to be the loudest. Synthesizing the diverse needs of a large workforce into proposals that take into account both individual perspectives and the needs of the whole community may seem impossible at times, but we believe it is the job of a democratic worker organization, and we embrace it. This means that the 13 members of the employee representative organization will be taking on the very serious responsibility of ensuring, through DAE's growing organizing structures, trustworthy, two-way communication with as many DPS employees as possible.
B subsection B and C speak to the necessity of bringing in subject matter experts to support the problem solving we would take on in this process in two ways. This policy invites non-voting members appointed by the representative organization and district administration to participate in the developing of recommendations in the meetings themselves. This could be health professionals to help craft recommendations related to student or employee health services, curriculum experts to speak on a particular literacy curriculum, whomever. It also invites the team to create sub-work groups to inform the discussions of the meet and confer team. One example could be a sub-work team that is examining EC staffing ratios. This team could be comprised of EC staff members like myself, EC caregivers, EC students, and other subject matter experts.
Hey, I'm Riley Finnegan, social studies teacher at Hillside the last 6 years, member organizer for DAE this semester. And I've got the accountability section. Steve mentioned this earlier. We agree that this needs to be a mutual accountability kind of relationship. So we're not just talking about holding the district accountable, holding the people at the top accountable because something went wrong. We're talking about creating really for the first time or more than ever before, a relationship of mutual accountability where all of us, the workers and management, share responsibility for providing excellent education to the Durham community and all the children. And then we can share that responsibility by problem solving when something goes wrong, making decisions together, and sharing in that accountability to all the stakeholders. So we think there's a few key components, key requirements for that kind of accountability. The first one, we need to codify a set of meetings between the employer and an employee representative organization. We can't just meet when things go horribly wrong like this. We don't have meetings like this normally. We also can't just rely on personal relationships between individual workers, individual decision makers. All the individuals change all the time. We want something permanent that won't be subject to, those relationships and the whims of them. We don't want to also depend on the generosity of decision makers when we need to really urgently solve a problem and collaborate. We think we need to mutually commit to a calendar together and stick with it. So The slide and the policy you can see there explains that we think monthly meetings between the meet and confer team would be a great starting place. That's May through November, kind of the non-budget season, and then additional meetings during peak budget season, because that's when a lot of these conversations seem to be happening. It also stresses there that we want the co-chairs of this meet and confer committee, DAE president and the superintendent, to co-create the agenda so there's no confusion about who owns the meeting, who's putting topics on it. Those two are co-creating it. Next slide. All right, this is an important one. I'm going to dig into a little bit. The employee representative organization, you've heard a few of us mention that, and we define it in the policy. The policy doesn't actually mention DAE anywhere. What it does is define thresholds for an employee representative organization and what we think would make an organization a legitimate representative of DPS workers. And we think DAE meets those thresholds. And I'm going to explain a little bit why those are important thresholds. So when something goes wrong right now, like it has this year, there's a huge scramble for scheduling town halls. There's a scramble to find worker input, to get a representative sample of workers to share how they're feeling. It's, a mess, basically. Trying to have 5,300 conversations with individual workers, a small group of leaders doing that isn't possible. Even if you're meeting with 50 workers at a time, that would be over 100 meetings whenever a big decision had to be made. And those wouldn't be problem-solving spaces, right? That's not a real model for equitable worker voice, collaboration, and mutual accountability, which is what we need. That model only empowers the decision makers, really, because it keeps that boss-employee power imbalance in place. And it might empower just a select handful of workers, maybe a random group of workers who could make it to the meeting, or maybe a chosen group of workers by the employer who are then just accountable to the employer and not their fellow employees. So that system doesn't really work. They can't claim in that situation to speak for all DPS workers, and what we want is an organization that can and can talk to all those folks and get meaningful input. So instead of that inequitable, ineffective system I just described, what we're here proposing is a model that we know actually works. People are using it all over the country. People have been using it for decades. We think the only way the district and its employees can really collaborate is an accountable representative employee organization, an actual entity the district can partner with and sit across the table from. So our definition for that in the policy, different policies for union recognition set different thresholds. Ours, as you can see in the policy, are this year 25% membership. That's so there's no barriers right now for us starting this process in the middle of this crisis so that we can co-lead our way out of it. And then at least 50% membership of DPS workers going forward subsequent years. And that's probably the most common threshold you see around in the private sector and in other states. The reason that threshold's important is because it guarantees that the employee representative organization will always remain accountable to a majority of the workforce and not just claim to. So Carlos mentioned it earlier, DAE has this ability already, is the only organization in Durham that can already claim to represent thousands of DPS staff. When we talked to 3,200 workers in 2 weeks, that wasn't by email or text. Those were face-to-face conversations between coworkers who trust each other. Those were equals talking to each other. There's no substitute for that, and it takes a lot of work to pull something like that off. We already have the membership base, the organizing structure, the democratic processes in place that give us this power to actually listen to thousands of DPS workers regularly and make decisions together. So the policy, what it would really do is allow us as workers to use our union's democratic structures to elect that group of trusted leaders to the meet and confer team that Simone just described. And then after they collaborate with the district's meet and confer team and reach any resolutions together on how to make the district a better place to work and learn, we would then be able to go back to our buildings, every single work site in the district, and get worker input again, right? Get a final vote to make sure that only resolutions that are accepted by a majority of the workers would be enacted or would be passed on to you rather. So this is the only way we can guarantee that every worker can have real input and guarantee that everything the meet and confer process is producing is in the best interest of DPS workers. None of that's possible without a proper employee representative organization like DAE. So the final thing to say here about thresholds, if somehow, despite all of our processes, we failed to represent the best interest of our coworkers in any given moment, a couple things could happen. Our members could elect a new meet and confer team that would do a better job, or we could lose members and drop below this threshold and not be eligible for this process again until we could get that trust back. So it's built-in, responsibility and mutual accountability. So next slide. Last piece of this is really just about how you, the school board, would relate to the meet and confer team. So to be crystal clear, the board would retain all of its rights and responsibilities under state law. The board, through this policy, would still hold the authority to implement policy and convene and set agendas and stuff like that. You would essentially stay the top of the district. That said, the policy does specify a few ways you would interact with the meet and confer team. Section B, subsection B, the board chair and vice chair are named as non-voting members of the district's meet and confer team. We think that'll facilitate the communication, collaboration, and transparency between admin, employees, and the board, and facilitate any of the meet and confer resolutions actually making its way to the board. And then all the resolutions of meet and confer teams, the meet and confer process produced would be submitted to the Board of Ed for your consideration following state law and all those policies. So there you have y'all holding the meet and confer teams accountable. So accountability all over the place.
Thanks, Riley. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm an occupational therapist, and tonight I get the opportunity to collaborate with Quentin, who's an EC instructional aide. And I love that we got to work together on this piece because occupational therapists and ECIAs work together in our buildings every single day. So we really landed from that place of like, how cool is it that we get to collaborate on this part together? So tonight we're here, Quentin and I, to talk about how our current payroll crisis could have been averted or handled very differently if we had a meet and confer policy in place. Let's be clear, right? Meet and confer is not an economic policy. It doesn't mandate any financial commitments. It doesn't create any new funding sources. And it doesn't cost anything to put in place. So some people might be confused as to why we're proposing this policy as a way forward after a financial crisis. The district's decision to withdraw long overdue raises for many OTs, IAs, and other classified staff has created a financial crisis. But it's also been a crisis of trust, of communication, accountability, transparency, these words that we're hearing on repeat tonight. So we're here to pose this important question. If DPS had a strong meet and confer policy, how could the implementation of more competitive wages for classified staff have played out really differently? First of all, transparency with information would have gone a really long way. If we had the right to access data that was relevant to how our pay would be determined, teams of our coworkers would have been analyzing budgets versus actuals, current and proposed salary schedules, frequency counts for the different salary grades, and the cost and viability of the various proposed raises last spring before the budget was passed. I definitely have some grief that this wasn't the process that we had, that we didn't get that opportunity to see that data and to be collaborators at that table. Inside of DAE's organizing structure, as my other DAE leaders have talked about, we have, as leaders, we're tasked with communicating information clearly to our coworkers, face-to-face conversations, two-way communication. So a broad cross-section of DPS would have had a clear understanding of the cost of proposed raises prior to the rollout. Even the broader community, including the general public, could have understood the cost, the true cost of implementing the Hill Study's salary recommendations. Under meet and confer policy, there also would have been multiple meetings, including the superintendent and CFO, the Board of Education chair and co-chair, HR representatives, and members of the employee representative organization. All parties could have gotten on the same page about the Hill Study's various recommendations and their budgetary implications. It's this collaboration that would have allowed us to stand in mutual accountability for these decisions about our pay.
If we had arrived at November and December without shared clarity on the financial impacts of the raises implemented in October, and the Board of Education had suddenly become aware of the possible problems, you could have called for an immediate covenanting of the meet and confer team in order to navigate these difficult waters, and we would be there to support you as a team and as a community. I work at Riverside High School as an instructional assistant. I have to collaborate every single day, and sometimes not with the same teacher, and sometimes not with the same students I get on a regular basis. And I have to keep my transparency with them. I let my students know I am not a perfect person. I do make mistakes. And when I make mistakes, I love for my students to catch me. I implore them to say, Mr. Hedden or Mr. Q, you made a mistake. And I would be like, thank you. But before we can move on, you see that there's a mistake here. Let's work together and find out how to get through this so we can go into the next question. That's what this meet and confer process basically will look like. It's a partnership. It's a team. It's a family. It's a community. We're working side by side. We're helping each other get through these crazy navigated waters, and we can get through it safely together. There wouldn't be no problems with this group, that group. We would all be in it as one. Now, no, we're not here to rehash the past, but we are here to look forward to the future. Greater transparency, accountability, collaboration, and trust. And we believe that a formal policy that put workers' voice at that table through an employee representative organization is the way that we can build that future, not just today, but forever as a unity and together.
Questions and answers?
Thank you. I wasn't sure that was, you all were finished. Thank you. Let me just say, first of all, that was a great presentation. It truly was. Y'all did a wonderful job, and so many, you were eloquent, you were impassioned, you were clear, and I just want to thank you all for that. Much, much appreciated. And so let me just talk just for a second about how we're going to move. First of all, I hope we'll have a lot of discussion from the board, comments, questions that you all might have, clarifying questions or comments about anything that you've heard. But we're not going to try to solve all these tonight. By mutual agreement of the folks on the board and folks from DAE, we're going to move this process along. And when we get to number 10 on our agenda, we're going to figure out how to do that. And that's going to be a thing that we have to do, and we'll have to figure out together tonight. But we're not going to try to solve all these things here. But anything that has been said is certainly fair game for discussion and questions. And so I'm now going to ask any board members that might like to comment or ask questions. Anyone like to go? Anybody want to go first? Emily, sure. Thank you. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you for this presentation. I have a very more clear idea of what it is based on how you described it. And I just have a few questions about, I guess my greatest like concern is about inclusion. And so my first question is about just membership and how what requirements is, has come up before, but like what requirements there are to be a member, what makes one a member, and what if somebody doesn't want to be a member anymore? Like, what's that process like? If you could speak to that.
Sure. Folks who join the union are full dues paying members, pay dues regularly when we are working. And so there are different dues categories for folks depending on your job classification. And what it means to be a member can mean a lot of different things. And I'll invite any folks to be able to share in a second about what it means for them to be a member. But a lot of it is what we talked about already, of being accountable to our coworkers and our students, and striving to build power to win the schools and communities that we all deserve. We know that while we're having this conversation here in Durham, and that has us in conversations with decision makers about policies and practices that impact our students and our coworkers. That also means that we are engaging in building power to impact things at the state and national level as well. We know that the state could do a lot better by our public schools. And so we are working with our coworkers, working with our caregivers of our schools and community members to try to build relationships that can change the way our schools are run and how they're funded. And I'll let other folks, if they want to chime in and talk about what it means to be a union member for them. But no pressure.
I mean, I can also speak to the last part of the question, which was around, well, what if someone wants to leave the union? It's a voluntary organization. We're not coercing anyone to be a member of the union. If someone wants to drop their membership, they fill out a form just like when they joined, and they can step out. In our building, for example, at Jordan, we had someone whose partner lost their job, and they were concerned about paying dues. And they filled out a form, and then as soon as their partner got their job, they came right back to me and said, I'm rejoining immediately. So I've seen that happen as well.
And if folks decide to no longer be a dues paying member of the organization, they are still part of the school community that our union members are accountable to. And so as part of our organizing committee, folks are committed to being accountable to a set number of their coworkers. So even if someone is no longer a member, we're still having regular conversations with them about students' learning conditions, about their working conditions, to know what feels important to them.
As for me being part of this union or being part of this committee and this group, I've actually felt listened to. I felt heard, which is something IAs normally don't get a lot of in our workplace. So to be heard and to have our issues addressed, and to have a community get around us and say, well, how about I come to your school and I'll show you how to do this, or I show you a plan, or I write this plan out for you. You can implement this in your day to day and see how that works for you. Just to have that support system there, that means a lot to me. That's why I joined. That's why I love being part of this group.
I'll go and add something to you, Micah. Hunter Tweetmeyer. I work at Riverside, where I've been a pirate for the past 17 years. I just also want to note that DAE and NCAE are member funded entirely, which I think is important to note here. For me, what it means to be a union member and a union leader is just to be part of a problem solving group, right? We're not just sitting around complaining. We're actively working together to solve problems. And even if we can't solve problems in that moment, really dreaming big to think about how we can solve those problems. And I think this moment right here is a moment that some of us have been dreaming for 17 years, to dream big and to be here with you all.
Thank you for that. I want to say thank you for those comments. I also asked that, and it wasn't like a trick question, but I am a former DAE member myself. It was many years ago, but and it has grown a lot since then. There are a lot of things I agree with the values. I'm impressed with the data gathering and interested to hear more about that as well. And so I guess, yeah, the biggest thing, then there are other things to discuss, such as, legalities and all of that. But I'm still wondering, like, we had some people walk out because they don't feel part of DAE. What would, I don't know, let's see. What would this group do about that, I guess, the inclusion part, or if you find yourselves needing to, like, that there are areas where perhaps there are no members, like in a specific position or something like that, or a location of the district. How does that representation then still take place? What I'm really interested in is, I think the idea of hearing from many people all at the same time is very interesting. As you said, 7 people cannot talk to over 5,000 people in a short span of time, or even a long span of time. That would be very difficult. And so what about if people feel, not included? What are your thoughts about that? Just about inclusivity and representation? Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of folks and I had mentioned a structure that we have called the organizing committee. And somebody is participating in the organizing committee because they are accountable to a set of their coworkers, whether they are members or not members. And so when someone shows up at an organizing committee meeting and they are voting a particular way or getting in line to, like, speak for or against a proposal or an amendment, they are doing so because they are accountable to those 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people, regardless of their membership status, regardless of their job title. Usually it is by work site, but we have some folks that go across work sites. We have folks who like OTs and PTs who they are accountable to folks across those work sites because they move so often. And so when we are coming with a set of conversations, it is not limited to our membership base. It is across the district.
Sorry, just a follow-up though. If folks do not feel that you are representing their needs, what is the union or the DAE's kind of approach to connecting with those people, those other workers who feel that you aren't representing them in how they want to be represented?
I think we approach as colleagues and coworkers. I think we try a multitude of conversations to deeply listen to and hear what are the needs that they're expressing. I think it is also true that we don't we don't act as individuals when we are in that shared space either. And so we will listen to and encourage dissension and different views and opinions. But when we move on something, we move as a majority of folks. And so there are times in which I have made a proposal myself that people disagree with, and the room told me no. And so if people disagree, we would still want to continue to have conversations with them and still invite them into the spaces that we have to be able to hear from coworkers. But then the room collectively decides the direction of the organization.
And can I just ask one more follow-up on that? And I'll save my other questions for the end. For the people who are not in the room, what is the engagement process for them so they could come to the room? Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm wondering if somebody who wants to talk about their process on the OC of how y'all had conversations with folks that are either members or non-members.
For me, I just approached them with what's going on. I asked them, what issues do you want to talk about? What are you feeling? How are you feeling? Do you have the support that you need? In the workspace, that is the most pivotal questions to ask a person. Are you being supported? Do you have the assistance that you need? Do you have this person that you can talk to? And when it came to me being part of this committee, that was the one thing I did. I asked people every single day, what issue would you like to talk about? I know you don't get heard a lot because you're a custodian. I know you don't get heard not because you are working in the cafeteria. I know you don't get heard a lot because you're working in the front office. But I would like to ask you, for me, what would you like to talk about? What would you like to work on? What would you like to address? What would you like to change? What if I took what you dealt with to my team and we talked about it? And I'll come back to you and let you know what they said. That transparency, that talking, that collaboration, that teamwork, that trust is there. Because sometimes all they need to hear is a voice. They just need to hear that person in their corner. They need to have that person that they can talk to. And for me, when I started doing this, that was my approach to every day at my school. What is your problem? What are you dealing with? Talk to me. If you don't feel like talking, you ain't got to talk to me today. I would never force myself onto a person. But if I knew that they were bothered, if something was bothering them and I could see it, I'm not one to let you go throughout your day feeling bad or feeling like you weren't supported. As an instructional assistant, that's what my job entails. I assist, whether it's in the classroom or person to person.
I wanted to add to what Quentin said. What I do is I speak to people, just talk to them. In any normal conversation, no matter where I'm at, I can be in the line about to vote, and it can be someone who works for DPS, and I will talk to them like, hey, how do you like your school? How's everything going for you? Just talking to them and getting to know who they are and what they care about and what's important to them. And then I share my union story with them. So just really engaging with people. And even if they aren't a member and they may give me some information that they may be dealing with, I bring it back to the union and let them know, hey, this is what's happening for some folks in this area, in the district, and then we move from there.
I don't think I introduced myself earlier. Sonia Tallhammer, reading teacher at Lakewood Elementary School. And I wrote some notes on my phone. First of all, like Kalitha and Quentin said, we are so committed to doing everything we can to build bridges with folks, whether or not they are part of our union. And when we move cards, when we move conversations across our schools, most of us are talking to the vast majority of our schools. At Lakewood, when we were moving some conversations around what escalated actions to take, we talked to 100% of our non-admin staff about that in a week. And that is the sort of power and structure that we have, and that is everyone, not just DAE members. So we're doing everything we can, and we will keep doing everything we can. And respectfully, I think it is up to y'all to figure out how you want to relate to workers who don't relate to you via the employee representative organization. We're going to do our best to keep engaging everyone the best we can, members and non-members. And we're curious what y'all are going to do to figure that part out as well.
Thank you, Sonia. You know, I've been here a long time, and we've had meet and confer, whether you want to call it that or not. Your former president, Michelle Burton, had a long-standing relationship with Dr. Mabenga. They met regularly on your behalf. They could pick up the phone when things came up and those conversations came. I think that is a piece of history that is rooted in Durham and rooted in our support for workers. So I appreciate y'all bringing this national model to us. And I look forward to us together with folks that are here at the table and folks that left the table, figuring out how this could work in Durham that is more inclusive than the model that's been presented here. Only when we represent all voices and all perspectives do we have strength in Durham. To the folks at the table and otherwise that were impacted by the pay crisis, we are so, so sorry. We are working forward together. Do I think that this would have prevented it? No, because this is our human organization with people that make mistakes. And so while I wish that meet and confer would have been magically curative, I have trouble believing that. What I do know is that very few of you all were in our meetings. Our work is conducted in public meetings, and we need you all to continue to show up and make comment in those spaces as well. So inclusivity is going to be a major key for me if we're to consider meet and confer going forward. And I'm so sad that the folks that were on the agenda to speak left. And we'll seek out other ways to hear their perspective and others that aren't here. But a Durham table welcomes others to the table, welcomes student voices to the table. How do you think that this relates to the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council? Be honest, please.
Happy to be honest. I'm not. So I think it doesn't replace the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council. I think it creates a different kind of structure where an employee representative organization has the opportunity to work directly with district administration on a regular and ongoing basis about a broad set of topics to problem solve all of the issues impacting our schools, and invites in a broad number of job classifications of folks past stack to work on that problem solving.
Appreciate it. So I think that one of the things you've requested in this is kind of an over ask of superintendent time. What you've asked for is more than any time I've ever had with a superintendent. So that kind of ask seemed a little bit much to me. Maybe my colleagues think it's reasonable. I think it's actually more time than, and I want superintendents to be out in schools, and I want cabinet members to be out in schools. So I know that time is finite. I wanted to talk a little bit about trust and about ways that you all might be able to join us in de-escalating through as we continue to lead through this crisis, and see what thoughts you all had in that. I know it's important to us to continue to repair harm, but also to keep kids in school. And so I wanted to hear how you all are thinking about work stoppages and school stoppages going forward.
As a labor union, there are a number of actions that our members consider in the midst of a campaign that consider context, that consider where we are as an organization, and then we as an organization democratically vote for what actions our folks choose to take. And that includes walk-ins, as a number of our folks here engaged in, and it regularly engages in checking in with our coworkers, right? We consider asking folks about what actions they want to take as an action itself. And so there's a broad variety of things that we try to do to push a particular message that we think our students and coworkers need.
Any other thoughts from others at the table?
I think you ought to press that question a little bit more. I think that's a really important question, and I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about it from folks at the table. Why don't you ask it again?
So we had a press conference, Chair Umstead, on, gosh, the days run together, yesterday. And what it appears from the instructional time and the calculations of those under state law is that we are at the point that if we have further sicknesses, days missed, that those will have to be made up. And in my fiscally responsible mind, that is where we get to actually having less resources to share amongst workers, because we're going to have makeup time, makeup days. There's no magical bank time left. So I just want to hear kind of how you all are thinking as you all help us continue to center students in as we center workers.
I think I understand that workers will often protest when they feel like they don't have a voice at the table to make decisions. When they are desperate to create good learning and working conditions for their students and their coworkers. And I think this policy that's being presented and the collaboration on this policy being presented can help create that path and that voice for folks, and reinforce for workers that are willing to come to the table and not the ones that choose to not participate in the conversation.
I can just add that our members vote on escalation or de-escalation, and we right now can't speak for all of our members and directly respond to your question.
So maybe somebody else can ask in a different way. I think it's just, I looked at the NEA website, saw sick outs and walkouts as a last resort, but it feels like sometimes in Durham, we've gone quickly to that. So I hear you.
In order to answer that, I will address it as best as I can as a worker and as an instructional assistant and a person who's only worked for Durham Public Schools for 10 years and was basically devastated by what happened. For years, Hold Harmless wasn't harmless. It did harm to some people's finances. Some people weren't able to pay rent. Some people, even to this day, you may not know them, but some of them live out of their car and still commit to Durham Public Schools. Yes, walkouts, sick outs, days of protest, that is absolutely the last resort that we go through. But what we've been doing for years is being quiet. We were being quiet because we wanted to see Could it get done? Could it get fixed with us not being rambunctious, not being so loud, not being so rowdy about it? Let's pump our brakes. Let's not let our emotions get too much into it. So we silence. And then sometimes we hold our other employees back. We're like, no, 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 don't go up there talking all crazy. Don't get all in your feelers. So we've been silent. We've been patient. And over the years, it's been kind of like a cancer. You try to contain it. You try to put the medicine to it. But with the unneeded stress, with the overworking, with the underpayments, with the constant things in the back of your mind, how do I take care of my kids? How do I take care of my house? How do I take care of my health? All of that stress. And I know this personally because my mom, she just recently passed away from this. With the stress coming back to you, it builds and builds. And when that cancer takes over, the body will shut down. Wouldn't it be a bad thing for us to be so silent to the point where literally everybody just stopped? Nobody addressed the issue. Nobody talked about what was going on. So yes, a sick out, walk-ins, days of protest, that has been literally the last resort that we could go through. And some of us literally, until this day, you can ask any other employee here in Durham Public Schools, they debate on, do I do this? Do I commit to a walkout? Do I stay home? Do I go to work? Because I've never not gone to work before. So yes, protests and walkouts and sit-ins and all the things that hindered people from coming to work, that has been the final resort.
Quentin, before we go on, I just want to say, I heard what you said about your mom, and I know how that feels. And so I'm sorry for your recent loss, and I know that everyone here shares that, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Thank you.
Go ahead.
You, and then we'll go to Millicent. Is that okay, Millicent? Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to respond directly to the point around students, student engagement. And I wanted to first kind of call our attention to a slogan that comes out of the educators movement in Mexico. That's Maestro luchando también está enseñando, which basically means that teachers in struggle are still teaching. So I teach social studies, history, sociology, Latin American studies. And I can tell you that in my 7 years at Jordan High School, I've never had more students ask me about Durham Public Schools. Okay. That has everything to do with the struggle that we're involved in right now. When I walk into class, they ask me about it. When I'm in the hallway, they ask me about it. You want engagement? That's what we're getting. We're getting it across the district. I've never seen more stories on DPS. I've never seen more families talking to me about it. And I'm sure everyone in this room can attest to that. So the engagement is there. We're asking for formal engagement here.
Thank you all for coming into this space and having this conversation with us. I think all the board members and the administration were excited to see and hear from you. One of the things and some of the questions that I have, and I think this goes back to both DAE, and I'm gonna make some requests, I think, of our administration in this question, is as we consider the meet and confer policy and the change that it could bring forth, can you all help me understand what work has been done in the past, particularly since we're talking about many, many years, and I can only attest to what's happened since July of 2022. That would be like my cutoff point. of all the options and ways for all stakeholders to engage, how has DAE shown up at the table? And so the things that come to top of mind for me would be emails exchanged with board members on behalf of DAE, particularly, and the superintendent maybe. The number of times and topics that DAE has come to public comment, like other folks can come to public comment, to budget work sessions, where they've given comment on things of that nature. How often do DAE members show up to their sit team meetings and their stack meetings? I'd like to see a demonstration that all of these things have been exhausted and used by DAE members. So we know exactly what we expect the outcomes from meet and confer policy to be that would be different from the outcomes of other public engagement. I think about the growing together sessions, how many of those educators attended, DAE members particularly. I'd like to know about all those ways that the board already avails themselves and administration already avails ourselves, and the ways DAE has engaged in those processes before we talk about what a new policy would look like. Because everybody is now asking for the same seat at the table. And I think in Durham, we work for ways to be very inclusive. And, PTAs now want a spot at the table, and they have seats at the table, and that we're developing the Family Advisory Council for Black and Hispanic families. And we have the parent ambassadors. There are lots of ways that people can engage, sit team, stack, and I'd like to hear how DAE is involved in all those levels of engagement with DPS. And I guess, can we get some support from administration with the emails and things of that nature, and some support from DAE to get all the ways that y'all have come to the table since July of 2022 to figure out how we could work together?
I think we could speak to when we particularly have run a campaign that is using those avenues as a particular tactic. But I think what is true is that there are folks that wear their union hats every single day outside of a campaign that we are particularly running. And so the ways in which DAE members are participating in their sit teams, in stack as a representative from their school, coming to make public comment, are vast, not only this year, but for years and years. I think the difference from those avenues to this is about a particular formal process that allows for co-problem solving around a set of issues that doesn't exist in the other places, and including sometimes the formal places like stack and sit, because there isn't an equity of who is helping to create the agendas, what's happening in those meetings, the recommendations that come out of them. There is always a power differential when we're coming to those tables.
Yeah, I would build off of that, right? As educators, when you've got a lesson plan that none of the students want any part of, it's not like blame the students that there's something wrong with them. And just like that, right? As workers, these avenues don't feel like they work. In other places that do meet and confer, they could also send emails and stuff like that, but they would rather sit down with real transparency and real collaboration. So I would just say, when we talk about de-escalation and satisfying workers, we've got almost 4,000 workers support this clear demand for a seat at the table. And so We've asked it clearly. We've communicated it publicly for weeks and weeks. That's a way to de-escalate. You'd be lucky to find 4 workers that think Stack is a meaningful place to collaborate and solve problems. It's just the truth. So yeah, we've communicated our demands really clearly. And these other avenues, we know they exist, but we're saying that they're insufficient to prevent problems like the one that's erupted. And respectfully, you know, there's questions, would this have stopped it or not? We couldn't guarantee anything, but we have about 4,000 people that think it would have, and it would help us get out of this going forward. So.
My name's, I'd like to add to that if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
My name is Millie Rosen and I teach 7th grade math at DSA. And I currently serve as the secretary for DAE. Let me know if I'm not loud enough. One other point I'd like to make.
You're always loud enough, Millie.
Thank you. I really try. One other point I'd like to make is that all those other groups that are named should also be part of collaboration with the district. We are not saying that we want to exclude them from this type of process. However, everyone who's not a DPS employee can run for office in this district and sit in the seats y'all are sitting in. That's why you ran. All we want is the same kind of formalized representation where we are the only ones who do not have access to that. I've told people for years, anyone who's known me for more than a couple years have known that I've been around DAE for a while. And I've told anybody that will listen, if there is another group that shows up that starts doing this work and getting to more people better, I will drop my membership in a second and join. But I have stuck with DAE for this long because all I see is us growing and being able to represent people. And yes, having really intense arguments about the direction the organization should take. And then coming out of it and continuing to be strong and work together on this. We are a labor union. And I know we have a pro-union school board, and we are really excited to work with you guys on this.
Millicent, did you have any other questions or comments?
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Jessica?
Thanks y'all for being here. I'm excited that we've made it to this point and that we're talking about what this could look like. And I guess my questions are mostly around like trying to understand, like I get the vision and I align with the vision, but I would like to better understand like what this really will look like. So that's what my questions are about. So 13 employee members is what you've proposed. And I think you said that they would be elected members, right? So what does it look like in practice? Like if you could give us some examples to help us better understand what it looks like in practice for these 13 individuals to ensure that they hear from a truly representative group of staff. Like that's an enormous, feels daunting to me kind of task. So like, can you help me understand what that will look like when that's in place, if it is in place?
Riley has spent a lot of time thinking about that in writing. So if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so the reason that doesn't show up in the policy is that's a matter for DAE bylaws, right? We want our members to craft the composition of those 13 ourselves and have the ability to make adjustments and stuff as we see fit later on. But we have been drafting that and we have been bringing it to leaders. What should that look like? Similarly, we have a board, an elected board right now that is split up by job classification. There's a high school director, middle school, there's what else? Student services classified, elementary. Basically, right, some pretty common sense stuff about making sure there's representation from every department in every corner of the district. And then it's a matter of the organizing committee structure that's been mentioned several times about making sure every single building is taking resolutions back through or taking any kind of vote back through it, and making sure we're hitting thresholds that we're satisfied with in terms of how many people have engaged. But yeah, all the specifics about that are things that we're going to develop more internally and ratify democratically the way we do everything else. And so, you know, picture 13 workers from a bunch of different departments, a bunch of different classifications that have been elected by their coworkers to represent them, and then a whole apparatus to make sure that their coworkers are feeling represented, right? It's in our interest always to represent a supermajority of DPS workers, right? That's our vision. We want to encourage 100% of DPS workers to join. So it's always in our best interest to, before we do anything, hear from that many people, see if we can build unity and see if we can, share goals that will help grow the organization. And everything we do is about doing that.
Thank you. That's really helpful, although I still feel like it feels a little bit fuzzy to me what this will look like. Does anybody else want to add to that? Or no?
Do you just want like some examples of the types of roles that we've talked about?
Help me see it. Help me see what this looks like.
The 13 you're talking about?
There's 56 schools, there's
Uh-huh.
13, and all different kinds of staff doing all different kinds of things.
Yep.
Even if they're all members of DAE, just help me picture from a visual
And
perspective.
also the additional work sites. We know we have that many schools, but there are also other buildings that we have folks who are working in without the district.
Yes, thank you.
I was going to talk about the OC. You want to talk about the OC maybe? So I'll paint one picture and then I'll let Carlos paint another picture. And hopefully they match up. So in one of our last organizing committee meetings, we had folks who showed up from a variety of schools. I believe there were 26, and that's actually schools and work sites because there are sites that are not schools that came in teams, sometimes of one, but as large as, I don't know how many people came from Jordan, 7, who were answering a question about what Micah referred to of escalation tactics. And there was a proposal that gets brought to the table, and then those sets of folks that are in the room that day have an opportunity to go back with their work site and talk together about what they understand their coworkers to their position to be on that decision. We have live debate that sometimes is very short, sometimes is very long, often very heated. And there is then ultimately a decision, usually that is closed by debate by Turquoise and Parker. And then a question is called where every single person has an opportunity to vote on what is being proposed. And if it passes, it passes. And if it doesn't, we go back into struggle to figure out what we want to see happen next.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add to that is kind of in the background, what people are not seeing are the variety of tactics that we use to reach people on a day-to-day basis. So I might teach at Jordan High School, but I've gotten up at 5 a.m. to go to bus slots. I've been to CC Spalding. I've been to Pearson Town. I've been into I can't even name how many buildings at this point. We'll be at your parking lot before you even get there with hot coffee and donuts. We'll be at your door when you get there in the morning. So we use a variety of tools depending on the building. We have organizing structures, as Simone said, that cut across the district, and then we have ones at the building level. And those folks are responsible for, say, 10, 12, 13 people in their building, so that when we need to move on a decision, I can say, hey, Riley, we're trying to get people's temperature checked. These 13 people who we're, talking about here, there's an issue on the table. We're going to take it back to our coworkers, and we'll get together as an organizing committee and say, okay, this is the issue on the table, and we're going to hit those range of tactics, whether that means some of us get up a little earlier in the morning and then go teach, or some of us teach all day and then we get off work and we run to another school right after that. So that's the kind of work that's been being done on a day-to-day basis, and that's how we've reached thousands of workers across the district.
Again, I'm Anna, and I'm an occupational therapist. I serve 3 schools. I'm at EK Poe Elementary, Fayetteville Street Elementary, and Shepherd Middle School. I also serve students in the community. And it's one of the been really exciting parts of the last month, as exhausted as it's been. Sometimes I get to school late with my daughter. She's a 1st grader. And so we go and we get milk and breakfast, and I walk her to class, but I often come back and I have a moment before I need to start doing therapy, and I've gotten a chance to talk to the cafeteria workers. And a really exciting thing happened today where I didn't just say, oh, well, let me go through this survey with one and then with all the cafeteria workers, but I made sure that she felt equipped that she could talk to her colleagues. So it's been a really exciting opportunity to support my colleagues into stepping into their leadership, maybe folks who didn't see themselves as leaders in their department. But she's been coming out to the meetings. She was at the meeting that Simone was describing where we were having all this debate. She's gotten more engaged with DAE and she's able to bring that back and talk with other folks in the cafeteria. Sometimes I was at Watts Elementary School doing an evaluation. I wanted to make sure those front desk folks engaged. I'm talking to them when I walk in the building. We had a classified staff mass meeting where we were really asking this question. Are there those of us that don't feel as represented within the building structure? What other structures do we need to build? And as OTs, we decided, yeah, we need to have representation for our job classification. So making sure that it's not just up to going back to leaders in buildings, but that we're creating structures that bridge across buildings and across work sites. So I'm also sitting down with IT folks and saying, wow, how many folks are on your IT team? And how do you communicate? Oh, you have a group chat. Like, who are leaders within your department? So we're really thinking creatively. And I think this is such an exciting time to make sure that we're not limited by the ways that we've talked to folks in the past, but we're building structures that every day are making us more responsive, better listeners, more clear, more communicative, more available to do this two-way communication that we take really seriously and do it better every time. And the first time we ran something, we wanted to talk to people, it took a couple months. And then we ran something else and it took a couple weeks to talk to a super majority of our colleagues. And that shows that we are getting stronger and better at talking to our people. And that's the work that I'm committed to. That's why I'm here. And I'm really excited that this is something, and I think I speak for all of us, that we want everyone, all DPS workers, to feel seen and heard through this process. And we're committed to building the strongest structure we can to make that possible.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of those responses to help us just like, again, get a real feel for what this could look, both the value of this, but also what this could look like in practice. I have some more questions, but I'm going to let my colleagues speak.
I have a question that kind of builds off of that.
Yeah.
Was your question on just process? I'm kind of wondering this, like if the 13 people who would come, are they kind of purely representative of what they have heard from everyone, or are they sort of giving their own opinion analysis as well? I think of our board, we are accountable to many communities. We also are all very opinionated on our own experiences, analyses, things that we kind of bring, our approaches or frameworks that we're using to analyze issues. So that's kind of, that's my question. Like, are people kind of only bringing like what they have heard from like this process that you described of like collecting information from everybody, you know, people across the district? Is it, and like, has it all been voted on before, or is it also representatives who are tasked with really kind of bringing their own framework or analysis to the conversation?
Yeah, it would be, I think it's a similar process. I will use Christy as an example in this moment. So Christy serves on our board as the middle school director, but she is also an EC teacher. And so when Christy comes to board meetings to offer her thoughts, I think she does so with multiple hats and her own kind of synthesis of her understanding of what she's heard from her EC colleagues, but also middle school colleagues. And so there's, I think, multiple opportunities for our folks to show up grounded in our folks. And I think that is both in their own understanding of what their colleagues have said, their interpretation of like their representation. So maybe it's EC, maybe it's middle school, but also in hearing in our regular engagements what people are saying about what's being proposed.
And one other thing, so I touched on it briefly, but you know, everything Simone just said, and then we also envision this mechanism where in the room, the meet and confer teams would reach basically a tentative resolution, and we would go back and use all these structures to get an actual like ratification from our members before anything was done. So I'd say more democratic, right, than most bodies, than the school board, right? Because we would reach, you know, something that the folks in the room could agree on, take it back to the buildings. If the buildings didn't like it, we'd have to come back and say the buildings didn't like it, right? So we're not imagining empowering 13 people to decide everything for all these, you know, 5,000 workers. We built in and pictured this thing, right? Which I just want to stress, you know, we didn't make up. We didn't just like get creative. This is just how it works in other places that do this model, and we know it works.
And then thank you for that. Thank you for describing that. And then I know you talked about how rapidly you could talk to that many people. If we are moving forward, I'm just interested to hear more about the timeline for that, because it sounds like there's a meeting, then people develop the resolution, go back, talk to everybody, get consensus on it, come back, vote, and then come back. Okay.
Giovanni?
All right, but let me-
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for this proposal of finding ways to be collaborative and transparent. It is a value that we have. And as I'm hearing that you're wanting a formal engagement, and there are other committees that were brought up around you being engaged and being able to be engaged and understanding those ways that you've been able to or not. What I did hear is that they're still not necessarily sharing power in those places. There's a power dynamic at the school level. And I just want to recognize and put a pin that maybe that's on the table, the parking lot over there. How are we going to resolve some of those dynamics? Because even without the meet and confer, we want to look at some of the school building dynamics as well, that could be replicated in what you're trying to do here. And I don't want to miss that opportunity to, so at some point, you know, something's not happening. There's a lot of systems that we have in place for shared voice. But what I'm hearing you saying, there's something that's not happening. Otherwise, I do want to mention the formal ways that the district has been engaging with DAE and others who are not necessarily part of TEE, but it's open to everyone. And that has been with the, mentioned before, the Budget Advisory Committee, Safety and Wellness Task Force, Student Code of Conduct, Strategic Planning. That's what I'm envisioning as being inclusive engagement. And when I think about those work groups or subgroups that you're talking about, when I'm hearing this presentation that there would be certain topics that are covered, from this standpoint, when those committees are developed, those are the topics that are in those work groups and that happen for whatever reason they're being developed at that time. So I want to make sure that we are improving the systems that we already have, while still understanding what the meet and confer is. I have some concerns around just representation. What are the percentages of your teachers are members? What percentage is classified staff as members? Who would be on the meet and confer team? And would there be representation of every department? And in particular, like you have members, our different schools have different sizes. You have some schools have more DAE participation than others. So like, what are your top 5 schools where you have participation and membership? And the reason I would ask those questions is as you talk about the accountability, the 25%, 50% on slide 14, you've listened, you trusted, you're trusting there's an equitable access to being implemented, and the majority votes across those districts. The majority votes, the majority gets the decision that's being made. And I'm just wondering about equity amongst those school communities where there's more DAE membership in some schools than other schools. And we know that all work conditions are different at our different schools, even just knowing the buildings and the ages that our buildings have. That is just impossible for some blanket decisions to be made, especially if there's an imbalance in representation. So I'd be curious to know about that as we're going forward with the meet and confer. And then the other topic I wanted to touch on is when you were referring to having a last resort for sick outs. I am curious about transparency around those conversations that led to the vote. The first one was January 31st. There was leadership conversation from DAE and leadership on the board. So when January 31st was the first sick out, and we were told that the board had adequate time to respond. I mentioned this before. I don't know who the we is because I didn't know the demand that was happening. And I would just want to make sure that we're moving with good faith effort, that when you're running your campaigns, that there are true negotiations happening that's inclusive of the board to know what's going on, and also to bring solutions to the table. One thing I pride myself on in talking to so many classified people in the different departments is these are some of the options. What are some of the solutions? And then we have a conversation back and forth. So I just, again, with that good faith effort and intent as we're moving forward. And then I'll close with, I really like the 13 elected by your association. And I get the picture that you're moving towards. I would like you all to consider full representations and what it might mean. Maybe you can explore is if you were able to waive membership so you did have full representation. That might be a solution to support more people, and then you're not looking at the imbalances with where the most representation is at the different schools. Thank you.
Giovanni has raised a lot of very important issues, and I don't know how exactly you all want to respond to them, but I think all of them deserve a response and thoughtful one. So, Simone, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm gonna rely on Millie because I did not write it down and I have ADHD and will not remember everything. And so could you mind, or if you have them written down and you could run them back.
What percentage of teachers are members?
It is educators in the district broadly, and we have grown tremendously this year of adding over 1,000 members. We have generally not spoken about our direct numbers in a public meeting about our membership base. We set a threshold for this particular policy at 25% this year, and then 50% threshold for people to be the employee representation organization moving forward. But our proportions for classified and certified are the same proportions as the breakdown for the district of 60-40.
I just want to ask a follow-up on that because I think it's actually really important when we're considering a policy that has thresholds around membership that we do get a breakdown of the number of people who are in the organization, how many are classified and how many are certified, what role categories and schools are also represented, and demographics as you could give us, because I think there's a DAE we know represents a lot of employees, but it would be important for us to know who those folks are, what is represented within that organization, and the breakdown that we would see. And I think the public also would, as the policy asks for, right, 25% and 50%, I think it'd be important for us to have that information to know.
Yeah, and I think if the policy passes, I think we're happy to bring the demonstration of that threshold being met for sure.
Yeah, and I'll just say that the demographics and the disaggregated demographics do matter. That's very important to this board and all the work that we do. And I don't want you to disclose your numbers. I'm not sure the reason to not disclose the numbers. But if that's, again, what is the percentage of that disaggregated data, as well as what are your top 5 schools that have the most representation?
We have, I believe it's 16 schools that are majority schools in the district. And so the majority of those workforces are DAE members. We have about 75% of our membership base that has reported their race. And that is split out to, of that 75% of folks that have reported their racial identity, 60% of those folks are people of color and 40% are white.
And I was talking about, when I said the disaggregate, I was talking about the teachers and the classified staff. What is that percentage?
60-40. So
And that-
60 certified and 40% classified.
The data point I'd asked you for before that I think got lost somewhere was how many of the impacted workers are DAE members?
We don't have a frequency count of all of the folks.
How many at this table? 2? 2 of 14? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, just asking.
Giovanni, why don't you go ahead and continue to ask your questions?
But I think there's also representation of folks who are members of the organization that are here today that are also impacted. I don't know if y'all want to raise your hands.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's looking like maybe a third of the schools, 16 schools. A third of our schools.
I'm sorry, say again?
I was just trying to figure out what the percentage of the schools, if it's 16 schools out of 54. I can't remember how many schools we have.
Those are schools, yeah, whose staff are a majority membership, the 16. We got members at every single work site. We've had over 40 of the work sites reached a majority of their staff around these demands, specifically this one, to do meet and confer. Every single school that participated in any days of protest, over 75% of those staffs certified classified were willing to take action for this demand and our demands around classified pay.
And that was, again, those numbers will be important as we're looking at this accountability. When you're talking about the majority is what would make a decision move or not, when the majority of the schools might not be represented, or the majority members are not in a particular school, when there's a particular issues, I don't know where, I can't find the list. Oh, here we go. If there's just one of the topics that might be of a discussion, but there is less representation of a school, or a school may have a different need for that topic. So to me, that full inclusion makes a difference. And I would just really be curious if y'all are considering other ways to get that full inclusion, if waivers are a possibility.
Yeah, I think Carlos spoke a little bit too about how we try to ensure that we reach the entire district from every corner of the county. So if there is not a strong organizing committee yet at a work site, we have folks that go before school, after school to talk to their coworkers at those other work sites. We have folks that have gotten on the phone and called through their coworkers that they know at those work sites to try to check in to see what their opinion is on a particular issue and try to build leadership amongst those schools so that they are at our tables themselves.
So you're saying if they don't have a vote, if they don't have a membership, they can still vote with their representative? If they're not a member, you're saying that your members are going out talking to people whether they're members or not.
Yeah, so when somebody, for example, like Christy, I'll use Christy as an example again, like she might represent in the leadership of Carrington, but sorry for anybody who is here from Lucas, but I'm just using you as an example. But if they don't have folks at Lucas, or there is one or two, we do have folks at Lucas, but there is one person at Lucas and they don't have a strong team, Christy might help out at Lucas to try to make sure the folks at Lucas have an opportunity to weigh in about a decision that's being made, and then try to be accountable to that decision when we come to the table together.
I definitely hear your practice, and this just that would be my unreadiness and concern, is that inequitable decision making across the different schools. And then I didn't really have any other questions. It was more of I would want to have good faith in negotiations with solutions coming to the table, and not be surprised, particularly if it's something that you're saying is the last resort.
Thank you. Alexandra, did you?
Yes.
Could I
thank
briefly
you.
respond to the question round?
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to respond briefly around, I think there's a distinction to be made around formal membership and reach. So for example, I have friends who work in school districts up north that have 100% union membership, because you get a job, you're a member of the union, regardless of whether you want to be in it or not. And in many of those places, they barely reach half the workforce, right? So I would love to hear if there's another organization in this district that can speak to every worker across the board, regardless of membership status, one-to-one, and get that feedback and temperature check. I can't think of anything more inclusive. Whether you're a formal member or not, I can tell you we talk to you, we listen to you, as I said earlier. So I just think there needs to be a distinction made, like as I said, between formal membership and real meaningful engagement, democratic participation across the board. I've seen in this organization at low points and high points, and we happen to be at a high one. But what I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt is that we go wall to wall when it comes to listening and talking to everybody in this district. If you work in DPS, you're going to hear from us. You've probably seen these faces that are sitting at this table before school, after school, at lunch, you name it. If there's another body in this district that is more inclusive than that, I would love to meet them and shake their hand.
And I just in response to that, much respect for inclusion and getting these voices to the table. And I hear you. There's a difference between membership and inclusion. There's also importance for relationship building, because I know there are some people who are not at this table because of concerns with relationship building. Those are things that still have to be worked out, because those are the people that I'm also hearing from. That's all. That's my point. When not just inclusion, but what are we doing to relationship building with those, and even with us? There are conversations that we're having good faith. And sometimes when people come to the table a little bit later, they didn't hear all the things that got us to where we were, but there's so much hurt and disappointment. But without the relationship, then it's going to the last resort right away, while there's been some good faith negotiating, working through here along the way before that. So I'm wanting to know, like, what are you considering to help get to that good faith relationship building as well? Because those conversations are good, and I hear you, even how to say this is what's important, this is how I'm connecting with people, this is how I know what's important to them. Yes, and there's still a segment that does not have that trust and relationship, that still has a voice to be considered, and I just want to put that to the table. That's my, not that you're not being inclusive, not that you're not, Christy, going to other schools with less representation to hear those voices, bringing people along the way. Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing about inclusion?
Can I ask you to make it short? I feel
Absolutely.
like this, we've had, I really think that this was a really important point
Yeah.
that Giovanni is raising, but I also feel like you all have really responded to it. So one quick one.
Just very quick, yeah. We take the inclusion incredibly seriously as well. I just want to stress that we're not trying to compare this meet and confer policy to some imaginary perfectly inclusive, absolute democracy. We're comparing it to what we have right now. One-on-one phone calls between the president and the superintendent, is that more or less inclusive than the meet and confer policy? Y'all having some conversations, is that more or less inclusive than us having 3,000 conversations? So the choice is, what's the status quo?
Excuse me 1 second. The finger clicks. I appreciate them. I've appreciated them a lot, and I really like them when they're for me. But a lot of times they're not for everybody. And so when they're not for everybody, then people they're not for can feel disrespected. So what I'm going to ask you to do, to hold it to something occasional. Can we do that? Thanks a lot. Okay. Riley, can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I think I'm done. Just what's more inclusive is the question. What we have now, the status quo, or what this policy outlines? And we would say, 1,000% is what this policy outlines. And we would work on making it better and better inclusion. But this would be like a leap forward from the kind of inclusion we have right now in decision making.
Thank you. Alexandra.
Thank you all so much. I'm actually going to just share that I look across the room and I see a lot of people that I've seen in schools. I see your faces. Some of you have talked about this issue. And some of you have recently joined DAE. Some of you have been DAE members for a long time. I've known of DAE for a long time. There's history. And as I share what I think about Meet and Confer, I do want to commend Simone, the meetings that we've had. The way you carry those meetings has been respectful. you brought on a good team. Christy, you know, Quentin, you all have made the best possible effort to engage us as people. Even though Quentin, you were pretty much like told not to talk to me and kind of pushed away. I think that is, I can understand why there's such fear for people to talk to me, but I also want you to know you have sovereignty, agency, and anytime you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. And that goes for everybody. And this did happen at here in this building. It did happen. So I'm just saying that because I have known DAE for a long time. I've actually helped with efforts, community schools, the pilot at Club Boulevard. It wasn't just community engagement. I actually worked on a survey. Jessica Benton and I met at Whole Foods. We met at the school. We met with Terry Phillips. We met with a lot of people to carry out the community schools. And Turquoise, you were at Eastway at that time, and you were trying to do all the work at Eastway to bring that. So there's history. And when I think about the wonderful things that are happening right now, it is about people finding a voice and finding a space to talk about what they need, and that is commendable. But I do hold grief for things that sometimes organizations can't help. And what I say is that we exist in a society that is about winning. And winning sometimes comes at a cost, and it comes at figuring out who is going to help you win and who's not going to help you win. And those are tactics that are not just exemplified in DPS by DAE. They just happen, and we have to be very careful about those tactics of silencing voices that may not be in agreement and working across difference. And so that's why I wanted to commend, you know, you all who decided to work across difference and engage somebody that is supposed to be persona non grata for some reason, when it should be the opposite way, because we're actually espousing similar values. We've actually espoused that. And actually, I'm going to also give it to Riley, Hillside High School. Thank you. Kids, talk about your engagement with them. So I want to commend you too. So the other thing that I noticed is that going back, my concern has been that throughout this whole night, I actually think about how the community sees some of you, and some of you are stellar. Like Turquoise, you're literally on NCCU's magazine, and you are pretty much everywhere. And I haven't heard one word from you tonight, and I actually wanted to ask you that. And I respect you letting me know that, you know, it's time for other voices, but I really want to hear from you, because you know the history of DAE and Alexandra, including how you all did everything possible to keep me from this seat, and told me that my indigenous organizing wasn't according to your book. DAE members actually told me that if you don't go to a certain school that has, you know, the background of Marx, and I'm like, I hear about Marx, I've read Marx, cool, but I'm an indigenous woman. And when you tell me that I can't organize, and yet I out-organize you and got to this seat, even with all your efforts, it kind of says that we have to be a little more open to the ways that communities organize and the ways that communities have sovereignty and agency to speak. And I will always be supportive of organizing, and I'm supportive of unions, but they have to be respectful of difference. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit from Turquoise. Turquoise, my heart is a little troubled even tonight. You know, a little child did this little drawing for me before I came to this board meeting. And she doesn't know anything about what this meeting is going to be about, but she knew I had a meeting, and I had to wait for her to finish this, and she was going to put a hat on it, but she didn't. But I told her it was very important. I was very grateful for this. And what I'm saying is that this is what this work is about, the children. I wanted to hear from you because you have such long history and you have always been respectful. Some of your colleagues have not. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the evolution of how DA has worked across difference, because what I've heard from people is tactics that sometimes silence people that are different. Like, for example, an organizational practice of rating people on a scale of 1 to 5, quotes saying isolating the backwards. People who are problematic somehow are deemed problematic in the organization. Again, this is not just DAE, but this is coming from DAE ex-members who said rating people on a scale of 1 to 5 is problematic. Isolating people that are deemed problematic, yours truly included, is something that I hope DA evolves from that, right? And what I saw when Mr. Quentin was talking to me, and one of your members decided to just take him away and say, "Don't talk to her ever, ever." It kind of let me know there's something going on that hasn't really changed. I want to hear from you. You have been here for a long time. I want to hear your voice. How has DA evolved in these, I would say, behaviors that are about control?
Thank you,
I'll
Alexandra.
just say, Turquoise, I've been listening, I've been waiting for you too. So, as well as Alexandra, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. So I want to start from a quote that I love so much by Fannie Lou Hamer. Nobody is free until everybody is free. And that is something that I think captures the moment that we're in right now as a school district. And I want to go back way further because I love history. To the merger of the American Teachers Association and the National Education Association, and then bringing it to North Carolina, from the North Carolina Teachers Association to the North Carolina Educators Association. Both of those merged through some serious uproar, disrespect, and most of that, just plainly speaking, and you can go YouTube, Google, read a book in specific, All the People by Tony Al Gilmore, that talks about very plainly that the merger of the Black Teachers Union and the White Teachers Union was because the White Teachers Union was bankrupt. And the Black Teachers Union had all the money, and they had all the money. And so really that's all it was about, was money. It was very transactional. It wasn't about relationship. It wasn't about what's best for people. It wasn't about inclusion. It wasn't about bringing Black and brown folks, who are the people who are losing the most, who are iced out the most. And if we look at this situation right now, we're talking about classified staff members, who the majority of our classified staff members, let's keep it 100, are Black and brown people. And they carry the bulk of this school district on their back every single day. Every single day. And you look at the folks in Massachusetts, they just dealt with something very similar to this. And at the board meeting, I'm gonna serve on the National Education Association Board of Directors. And at our meeting this past weekend, one of their directors said that at the culmination of their negotiations and bargaining, it was the education support professionals, the classified staff members, who said, more than anything, we really just want people to not use us for their movement, for their benefit. We want people to respect us for who we are. They want people to see us as the people who you can't really live without. It's not a moment of hijacking. It's not a moment of, again, transactional. We're talking about real people's lives. We're talking about people who really have great, great hearts. And we can't ignore the people. And that's sometimes that people part. Anybody who knows me just a little bit knows that above everything is people. I love people, and I will go all the way for somebody. Just, it's not about the work of just building a beautiful story. It's about people. And that's what we are forgetting in this moment, not just on the DAE side. It's everybody. We are thinking in so many different ways, and there's a lot of moving parts to what we're trying to figure out. There are a lot of people who are trying to figure this thing out, but we have to, at the core of this, remember people over this whole thing. And I think the very last thing that I will say is we have an obligation as a school district to fix this for our people, because this is totally unacceptable. The way we have played with people's lives in this, and going from month to month. Being a public school worker in the money side is already a month-to-month thing. Before this movement right here, it's already a month-to-month thing. But in this moment, this is so sad. And again, I want to speak from the side of, this is not impacting me. And I do want to give space for people who this is their lived experience, because one of the ways that white supremacy does show up in this world is people who are privileged and not experiencing it, speaking for the people who are experiencing it. And that's not something that we are going to continue to uphold. We will dismantle white supremacy at every turn in this school district. And that's on everybody in this room, everybody that's not in this room, that's on the stream, everybody across this country. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And that's not me, that's Assata Shakur. But I want us to really remember that we have a duty to fight for each other.
And there is nothing more important than that. And the other thing that I do want to say is for us to also remember that the North Carolina General Assembly on Jones Street has an obligation and a part in this as well, because if they were not upholding white supremacy, forcing local school districts all across this state to have to try to get blood from a turnip to bring people up to where they deserve to be, we might not be where we are. So it's important for us to hold accountability across the table and to Raleigh. And remember that in this moment, we can't say it enough that elections matter. And I hope that everybody understands that on this day at the start of early voting. Am I correct that today is the first day of early voting? So I want us to remember that on this start of early voting. And again, just want to wrap this up, that we have a duty to fight for our freedom. We have a duty to win. We must love and support one another because we have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
Thank you, Turquoise. I do have a follow-up. That is powerful. There's something about relationship and trying to check ourselves on transactional dynamics. And you named that. I mean, that is something that is very important to me. I wanted to share because it's important for the grassroots leaders out there. DAE has been involved in a lot of great efforts. When it was Wielding Acosta, actually, Allison, I'm shouting you out. You're not the only one, but you're the one I see tonight. Anybody who remembers Wielding Acosta, like if you were there and you were a part, right? That was a time when DAE was working with grassroots leaders. Some of us who, Wielding is from my country. He's Honduran. And he's going to be publishing his book. I hope you all check out his book, his story. And this board, including Natalie, you've been here, you were here at that time. We worked towards a resolution and policy change that was about due process. And I was out there with a whole lot of people. Grassroots was like rooting, yes, we're winning because we have to pass a policy that will protect our students. Any law enforcement agency who wants to come into the schools and ask questions, just informally, no, that's not acceptable. FERPA is federal law. And if they want to be able to talk to anybody about our students and get information, they have to have a warrant. And so there's so many efforts, including going to Homeland Security. Allison, you were there, and also shout her out. Who was there with you? In the Homeland Security office. So anyways, I'm also drawing a blank, so. But these are real stories of like ways that we have collaborated in the past. Also, the two schools that the Innovation School District is going to take over, Glenn, right? Elementary that is thriving, and also Lakewood Elementary. And so those are wins. Those are ways that we have. And then community schools, like my kids had to get up at 6 a.m. to be able to do focus groups, to be able to like make photocopies. I spent hours at that photocopy machine, you know, making the strips and telling people out of the box, you know, at Brogdon, right? It was like thousands of people came out, but it was like a whole lot of work to get initiatives that were helpful for families. Those are wins. But the underbelly of all this is sometimes we don't work together. Sometimes we attack each other. Sometimes we tribalize our efforts and decide who takes the credit for it. And that's hurt a lot of grassroots leaders who feel like the win was DAE's win, and it was them who brought that to DAE. With teachers who also were committed. So I also want to make sure the teachers who work with Wielding also. But we have to continue to build relationship. And I just, again, I want to support organizing because I know that the voices of people matter. And I am not anti-union for some of you who are actually saying Alexandra's anti-union. I'm anti-oppressive tactics and oppression and white supremacy showing up in movements and organizing and utopian movements. Utopian movements are detached from reality. We have to be real. I want to look at all my colleagues, and I said this to Simone, so this is not anything new. We are Millicent, Jessica, Alexandra, Natalie, Bettina, Emily, Giovannia, all of us, women, all of us, very committed to this work. All of us, we're not your enemy. And we've approached, every time you want to meet with us, we're there. We're not your enemy. We have actually spent countless hours talking about ways that we can improve relationship. And I don't think we're at that point yet. I want us to be at a point where we can work together. At this point, I want to continue to have these conversations, and don't blacklist any of us. Don't do that. We're all here to serve. We're all here for a reason. Durham voters elected us. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to offer any response to that, to Alexandra's comments?
I think hearing you speak on DAE's history and speaking on the history of what previous school boards have accomplished, I think still also speaks to the point of people come and go in positions. And what we want to have is a lasting policy that brings us all to the table to have regular and ongoing conversations that are not at the whims of a personal relationship. It should not be because the president has a friend and that's why there is conversation with a board member or a superintendent. It should be a worker's right to be able to have a seat when decisions are being made that impact their students' learning conditions and their working conditions every single day. So I agree that like we should be moving past just friends, right? We should have a formal policy that brings us all to the table so that we can work together.
Thank you. I'm going to now turn to Bettina, who has some other questions or comments, and then we're going to move from that into our public comment period. And after that, we're going to then move into their action steps. Okay? So we're going to be winding this down after Bettina's questions and comments.
I'm going to try to keep it brief. A lot of my questions have already been asked, and I appreciate the history that this board and the many iterations of this board has had with DAE. So I joined the board in 2016, and I can talk about from 2016 different members and different folks coming in, the respect that we have for the organization, the desire and the long desire to collaborate and to listen and to acknowledge. I think there's maybe one email that Millie sent me and asked me to come somewhere and I didn't respond to. I remember that, but I think that's been it. Right, like most of the we are
Not too late.
It's not. I can respond. Come talk to some. It was a yep. We can do that. But I think we have been open and responsive to this group in ways that, from my understanding, other school districts are not. And not to say they're the comparison, but like I just want to be transparent about that. And I think the ask around accountability and transparency to us, I want to ask to you. It was damaging, I think, I'll speak for myself, to my relationship when I heard that the board had not met things that we weren't communicated to. And so I would just ask for that transparency around the board has to have a meeting to act on a thing. So if we're going to have an action, let's make sure the board has a meeting so the board can act on a thing to make sure that happens. I know that our staff has been working diligently on the public records request. Been a busy couple weeks for DPS. So I'd ask for some patience and some grace on that. And then I would also ask that we ask for some data around your membership. And that actually would be important for decision making. So I would ask for that same transparency as we come forward. And I want to say again, back to this relationship, like the president is meeting with the superintendent because of the deep respect that the board and DPS has for DAE. And I think my sometimes frustration is it feels as though we haven't had that long-standing relationship in the way that this conversation is playing out publicly, and we do. So I understand that we've been in a huge pay debacle. I'm not going to debate that. And I know that this is definitely impacting people's lives. And I think the way we come to the table matters. The history matters. The relationships matter. That accountability and that transparency matters. And I would just ask that we both lean into that and can hold each other accountable for that. Because this is about our students. It's about our families. It's about the whole Durham community that's counting on all of us to show up, right? And all of us have to work together in order to make that true and that real. So I'm just asking for that two-way street for us to think about what we need to do moving forward. I think I asked all my other questions earlier, but I just appreciate y'all for this conversation. I'm sure there'll be more questions to come, but I think we have to have, we need a reset on this relationship in some ways and remembering where we were to get to where we are.
Thank you. Comments?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Nick.
You know, she inspired me with the history talk. And I challenge us all to reset going forward. One of my concerns for the rapid growth that you all have had is that the vision is so extra visionary. And so the ask that you all are bringing that was supposed to come for the spring, the 6,000 a person, the 8,000, the 300 additional people, all of these great things that we would love to join you are not affordable within local property taxes and the limits of what we can do. And so I need y'all to continue as you work to educate members and new members about the political reality that you all are well too aware. I don't have to go through any of that with you all, but also help us join with realistic conversations about what is possible. We are about to have to make an incredibly difficult decision that none of us want to make about people's pay. And it came from a place where this board on our own went and fought to get you 15 an hour and then 17 an hour. That came from us leading. And so help us communicate with your membership what is possible and realistic, even when it's hard. And when you talk about meet and confer, Riley, like, and y'all having to vote and then take things back to your membership, if your membership just gets mad because a superintendent had to make a really difficult, impossible decision with the limited resources we all are facing in North Carolina, that's not going to help build trust within our community either. So I think those are some of the thoughts that I had as we go forward.
Those were important comments from board members. Your thoughts in response?
Yeah, I think we have had a lot of hard conversations with our coworkers the past set of weeks, and are currently having some really hard conversations with our coworkers about this particular pay issue. And we want to lean into having really hard conversations about the realities of our working and learning conditions. We want to do that with as much information as other folks who are able to make decisions. And I think that is what feels different in this moment, is not having the information and relying just on the word that something isn't necessarily affordable, I think is why people have felt frustrated, or they've reported that they feel frustrated. And so I think we want to lean into having really hard, critical conversations that produce real solutions for us and for our kids and for our communities. But we want to do it in a way that we know we're going to have a regular ability to get the information and the ability to have collaboration outside of just the relationship.
Please, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, please.
I wanted to go back to the point of the membership. It's grown. I remember the times when it was like 600, 800. One of the meetings we had this month, was it, that it was like 2,000, and then today I'm hearing 4,000. So it's growing. The organization is growing. What I do have as a request from administrators is what was shared by Mr. Carlos, that it's before school and after school. That sounds good. But just respect for administrators who are saying that it's also happening during the work hours, sometimes distracting from some of the duties that teachers have, educators have, instructional assistants have, to do the work that they're clocking in for or showing up for. How are we keeping tabs on how recruitment is taking place during work hours? Is there a mechanism by which administrators can have that conversation with you in terms of their concerns about recruitment happening during work hours and not just before and after school, as Mr. Carlos says that he does, which I believe you that you do that, but that's not what I'm hearing from administrators and folks at the buildings who are saying it's happening even during time that folks are supposed to be teaching our kids or prioritizing the focus on our children.
So is your question, how do administrators communicate with us about when membership conversations are happening, or what's your?
Well, my question, one, in terms of the process, right? It's all about process. Is there like communication that this should not happen during work hours? It should be before and after school. Is there anything, and the other question is, if that is not the case?
I think that's a great question. I can respond to it. We do have the legal right to do it during the workday, during planning periods. I think you're right. And I think a lot of people would actually be really excited to have a conversation with their admin about setting times that admin feels comfortable with having those conversations so that we don't feel like we have to fly under the radar. Unfortunately, in a lot of buildings, we're hearing a lot of people being scared of even mentioning being in a union, taking action with coworkers, or even people who are not in DAE just doing things like taking action on those days that we went out. There's a culture of fear in a lot of schools. And I think people would really like to move past that as well. I think having those boundaries would be really helpful. We've just never been able to have that conversation with admin at this point because admin and then DPS administration overall has always had all of the power, 100% of the power. We'd really like to share that. And that would include putting limits on what we can do as well. I think that would make sense.
I think there's also a distinction that if you can talk about a football game, you can talk about your salary or your working conditions. And I think it is often a slippery line, right, of trying to prevent someone from talking about their working conditions to say when they can or cannot collaborate with their colleagues about their day-to-day lives. And I think what Millie is referring to is that power imbalance that tries to enforce workers from being able to take action and flip those power balances. And so we often have conversations with our coworkers about what types of resources they're using, but we also do encourage our folks to build their power amongst workers to be able to change their working conditions.
I thank you for that. I think the word that was shared was solicitate. Sorry, the line, when does talking about your work conditions become solicitation to join a member-driven organization where you pay dues and all that? So there is a line, right? Like you can talk about the working conditions and do you want to do something, meet me for coffee, or let's talk, at this time during planning period, for example. But also what happens if you don't have planning period? And you know what I mean? It's the opportunity cost of at what point does it become solicitation? So that's just something just to keep in mind because I have heard that feedback from different folks in DPS who are just questioning that. When does it become solicitation during work hours?
Thank you. I don't want a response about this now, but I did think that the question that both Natalie and Bettina were asking you all earlier was an important one, which I hope you will think about. That is to say, if there is meet and confer and there are 13 people in the room, there are difficult decisions that the district needs to make. True. You all will help be able to make them better if you were at the table and with the data that you need. But there's also a responsibility that goes the other way. This is where the accountability comes in that we've all talked about as mutual. It can't just be that the administration makes all the hard decisions or brings all the hard decisions to the group, and the group goes back and that the representatives go back and it would be easy to then hear from people and not give them the necessary tough message. It's really hard to give a tough message. I know that because I've shied away from it a million times myself. So I just want to challenge you all with that. It's something to think about going forward. I really think that that's one of the hardest parts of this is that, the thing about any kind of co-governance is that there are people who are if you're part of the co-governance where you are representing a large group of people who have really incredibly important needs and also demands, to give them a tough message is hard. But if you are co-governing, that's a necessity. So just something to think about. I said that because I realized that my actual only role here, other than that statement, is eye candy. I am totally. This meeting did not need me to be a facilitator, but I'm pleased to be here. I know that's the eye candy thing. Okay. Yeah. How about some? Okay. So we're now going to move to the public comment, and I don't know, are there transportation mechanics, fleet maintenance supervisors, or lot managers still here who would like to be heard? We would love to hear from you. Is anyone here who would like to be heard from? We would love to hear from you. I do have a comment about these folks as well. It is not just the responsibility of our school administration and our school board to bring these folks, to work with these folks to help them figure out what they need. When I hear you all say that you're reaching out to everyone, I really hope that part of that everyone is these people. And I trust that it is.
100%.
Thank you. 100%. Great. Good. Pleased. Okay. Next, other public comment. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard? Anyone else in the room that would like to be heard? Anyone else that would like to be heard? Okay. Don't be shy. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Now I think we're going to move on to, in a way, kind of, where the rubber meets the road. We're on item 10, if you're looking at your agenda. So what I'm going to ask the board members is, I'm going to ask you all first, and this is, again, I want this to be a joint conversation. So I want to hear from board members your thoughts about moving ahead with Meet and Confer. You've heard the request from these incredibly eloquent and powerful words that we've heard around this table about Meet and Confer. You all have asked really good questions about a lot of the details. We know we're not working that out tonight, but I'm going to ask you all, would you like to move forward with a working group that would include members of the board, perhaps 3 members of the board, 5 members of the DAE, to have a working group that would take on this question? I'm sorry. I think that's the question I want to ask the board. Would you like to go ahead with this working group? This is, and if I get a sense of that, a majority of the people that would like a working group like that to move forward, then we will do that. There's also questions about how to reach out to workers who are not members of DAE in this process that we are going through now. So we've talked about that, about how DAE might reach out to workers who are not part of them, and I just got a big nod from everybody about one group. But there's also the issue now that we've heard a lot about workers who don't feel represented in this process. And so I think some thought needs to be given to how they might be included in the process as well. I'm going to boldly make a suggestion. And that suggestion is that there be 2 groups of board members, that there be one group of board members, 3 board members that you all could choose, or I don't know how you want to do it, Madam Chair, that would meet with a group of DAE members to talk about Meet and Confer, and that happen timely, and that there be a second group of board members, that could be 2 or 3 members, who think about what processes ought to be in place for people that don't feel represented, be it the transportation transportation mechanics or fleet maintenance supervisors or others. And we know, and Giovanni did a great job of listing a bunch of them, as did Alexandra and others. There are lots of different mechanisms that DPS already uses to include employees of the district, where they're solicited in various ways. There's also lots of, in the history of DPS, I can certainly tell you my time on the board, we set up advisory committees in certain areas. And so that's my recommendation to the board. And I'm certainly, I know I'm not the policymaker here, but I have been listening. And so those are my thoughts. But I'm happy to hear anything else from the board, and you all will be the ones that are making this decision about how to move forward. And after we figure out how to move forward or if to move forward. Then we'll talk timeline a little bit. Yeah. So I will see which board members have any thoughts about this.
Happy to kick us off. The board has an ad hoc policy around committees, right? So we could use the ad hoc policy to create a committee to have further conversation. I think, and I would feel better about having everyone in the working group together, not having separate working groups for DAE and other workers. I think that if the employment representative organization wants to represent all the employees, they got to have all the employees in the room, right? And so how do we have a joint committee where we're working through the details or working through whatever needs to happen? And I think this committee could help move this process forward. So that would be my recommendation. The policy states that the committee would have to be appointed by the chair and has to be approved by the board. We do have a meeting coming up February 22nd where we could have conversation around what that would look like and have a formal agenda item on it.
Do you conceive of the work of the group to be around meet and confer or other things as well?
I think that might be what the group should wrestle with. We have a meet and confer policy, and the group can start there, but I think the group should wrestle with where we land.
So Bettina, I appreciate that, and I'd be willing to serve if needed. What I'm interested in is having a timeline that is not rushed, but is bringing voice to the table and taking the time that it deserves. Because while this has felt an urgent demand for DAE, our urgency and my urgency is figuring out this pay thing, starting to work towards next year's budget, getting back to the work of growing together. Like there is much work to be done in addition to this. So I think that it deserves the time to get it right. Yeah.
Alexandra, and then Jessica.
I do believe power belongs to the people, and the people are DPS stakeholders. I commend DAE for building a movement of folks that are directly impacted. And so I welcome conversations with you all. I do also hold the same truth that Bettina mentioned. Some people walked out tonight. I mean, if that doesn't tell us anything, you know what I mean? It's like they were here and then they said no, like they want to have their own, maybe scheduling another meeting with them, right? A general meeting. And so that just really exemplifies to us a need to open the table. The package that you have all worked so diligently on, it's very thorough. I mean, you gave us a legal memo, you brought a PowerPoint, you prepared this very thoroughly. I guess the only question is, does this package still serve or work if we open up the table? What would that look like? So that's my question to you all. But I stand with our board chair in terms of making room for stakeholders who may not be DA members at this moment. Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll get responses from y'all in a little bit, but I want to hear from all the board members.
I'm enthusiastic about moving forward with a meeting. I think it will be great to have a subgroup of folks from DAE and the board. I do have similar concerns as my colleagues, and I'm not really sure how to handle them. It does not feel right to exclude folks that are not DAE right now in the next meeting. And I don't know, I mean, interested to hear your thoughts in a few minutes about whether you truly do want to explicitly exclude folks from this next meeting. So yeah, I think that's something we need to grapple with, and we could grapple with it together. But I do think that folks who are not part of DAE should be allowed to be part of that meeting to help us figure that out.
Millicent?
I'm excited about any board members that want to move forward with such a conversation. So I look forward to seeing what the outcome is of the ad hoc committee.
Giovanni?
Thank you. This is a really good starting point. My questions were very much centered around the foundation, inclusion, and things of that nature. So I am ready to move forward with a work group to dig into some of the other details. I know you all are beginning your plans as well and creating an outline, creating more of the policies around what it looks like for you all at the same time, and that takes time. So I do want to make sure we are very thoughtful in this. So yes, I am for looking to creating this work group and being cognizant of the timeline, how this can happen. And I heard you say, and I want to make sure I'm clear, this work group will be inclusive of those who are DAE members and those who are not. Because that was really the part that got me when collectively our transportation mechanics, fleet maintenance supervisors, and lot managers removed themselves collectively. And it feels like there's still another step that has to happen in some reconciliation with the work group that forms. And I'm happy to be a part of that conversation.
Thank you very much. Thoughts from our DAE friends? Of course.
One more thought, just as we're thinking about logistically how to move forward. I think it might at some point make sense to do what you had recommended, Steve, which is to have different groups. Maybe. I think that in order to get to that decision, we need to meet together first. And I don't feel comfortable excluding first when we're still figuring out the details. And because that feels really sticky to me and something like that we need to talk about all together with folks all at the table there.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Okay. Thoughts that you all would like to offer?
I think having a working group to work out the details, I hear a lot of questions. We hear a lot of questions that we want to try to work through together. Questions about frequency, the time for the superintendent, and details about the policy make a lot of sense. I think the proposal that we have on the table, the policy that we have drafted, that is based off of the planks that our members voted for resoundingly and have demonstrated majority support for over and over again in the past couple of weeks, has the employee representative organization as us that democratically decides the workers that are at the table. I think we have had iterations of conversations in this past week with different classifications of workers who have told you all directly that they want meet and confer with the union and that they want their voice heard there. And so I think there's a balance of an organization that is representing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 of the employees in this district versus 50.
When you all have done your research around the country and you've been to NEA meetings, have you not found any community where meet and confer includes other voices besides union membership?
So I think it depends on the iteration of what kind of back and forth about working conditions exists in other parts of the country. I think Carlos alluded to places where there are different unions that represent different workers, and then the managers and the people who make decisions then have to figure out how to respond to all of those different organizations with competing interests. And here we have one union that represents workers in this county. I think we talked about at one point the example of Austin, and they elect who is going to be the employee representative organization in a similar fashion. And in our puppet as 24, and in practice, we have had overwhelming majorities of folks in this district who say they want meet and confer through their union.
Yeah, I would love to see some data on that. Just right. So we're talking in numbers, and I don't want to. Please don't hear this as I don't believe what y'all are saying, but I think for us, in order to be the decision makers, want to kind of see like, what is the role? How many folks? What are we looking at? Like, I think that's important for us to be able to wrestle with as well. And I want you to hear there was a willingness from every single person on this board to want to move forward with a working group. I think that feels important. I think we also recognize that we all have a constituency that we also own. And that includes lots of different workers and families and other folks who have expressed concerns or support for the work that's moving forward. So I don't know that we're gonna, maybe we can answer that question today, but I think we need more information. And an ad hoc committee is a public meeting, so we got to make sure that everyone is there. It's open and noticed and all of that. But I'm interested to hear more, to see some of that information and that data.
Right. So for me, what that conversation brought me back to, what you just said, Simone, is the accountability piece? Because one of the things that I've previously asked for from DAE is best practices and examples of where this is happening across the country. One of the trainings that I consistently reference when I'm doing my work on the board is school board partners. And I was able to connect with some folks across the country who do have meet and confer that allow other groups to be a part of the conversation and have that seat at the table as part of meet and confer. And so, because I asked that of you, I am going to take the initiative to share those best practices that I have found with you all as part of my next steps when we leave here.
Thank you, Millicent. Alexandra?
I'm just tracking some of the comments that are coming in, and folks are like thinking, why are we beating around the bush and not solving the problem like we're going around? And for the community that's listening, we have a board meeting coming up where we will discuss the salary options. This is not us trying to avoid the salary option discussion. We have hired a controller who's working, and we're going to have those updates to you. But I do think there are a lot of people here who have questions, and I do want to give something, or at least try to give an opportunity. And the question that came in was about transparency, and we heard that word tonight, transparency, accountability. What does that look like? And I think, the problem that we have is a $20 million problem that the report said was known since February. And so we opened with Robert's rules. You all may not be able to vote, but maybe, raise your hand if you think this is a good idea. I want to make a motion that this is not about meet and confer. This is because there are people who are asking for questions and they want clarity. A motion that we share the memo that was sent from the chief financial officer on November 8th, which is the date that is on the investigative report. What did he share with the superintendent? What did he propose as a solution to this $20 million problem? So I make a motion that we share what the chief financial officer shared in a memo November 8th when he essentially notified the superintendent of the issue. And I will need a second.
Ms. Valladar, or Alexandra, excuse me, one of my first names today. I do want to make sure that we kind of keep this meeting on our agenda topics. It is, that memo is publicly available. If people can submit a public records request, and we can make sure that they get that information, email the board. I know people have done that already. But I just want to make sure that we don't get too far off of our agenda topic tonight. And that for the folks that want the transparency, please email us. We can send it out to you, because that is a part of the public record.
Can I make a motion that that memo be made publicly available so we don't have thousands of people asking for a public records request of that memo? I mean, I actually do want to, I move that the memo from November 8th be made publicly available, and people do not have to email us individually thousands of requests. I move that that memo from November 8th be made publicly available so people understand what the chief financial officer was offering as a solution or as a suggestion to the superintendent when he first notified the superintendent of this major problem, which is why we're here tonight doing meet and confer with DAE, because we all want a solution to this problem. And so if you want this transparency, I make a motion that we make this memo publicly available. Can I get a second?
I don't hear a second.
Oh.
Thank you. All right, friends.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a second to the motion.
I guess for me, I just want to be clear, and I have been sharing information that this meeting has been to talk about the logistics for meet and confer. And as I heard everyone on the board, outside of Emily coming back, saying they want to begin a work group and what the structure of that work group would look like, excuse me, what the structure of that work group would look like, I have a lot more questions. And what I was saying is that you all are still developing the structure of what that would be. So even when we begin to explore a policy, we have work groups that come together to craft the policy and have plans around it. So I'm not sure what you were referring to at the time, Simone, as far as, you know, that there are members who want the meet and confer to go forward, and I felt like that's what we were doing. So I'm
Shivani,
just stuck there for
in
a
fact,
second.
you are repeating what our attorney just told us. So yes, he is agreed with you 100%. The attorney says this is not a motion that is within the bounds of the agenda that was issued for this meeting and what was publicly announced. So this will have to wait for another time. I'm not sure what you all's protocols are otherwise, but that's what the attorneys just came over and told us. So thank you. All right. I have heard the board say, I've heard, as Bettina just said, each member of the board I have heard say that they want to have a working group that will be made up of, and my idea, as usual, was not well received, but I'm used to that. They would like to have a working group made up of DAE members and or some representatives from non-DAE members. We're going to talk about that first, the makeup of that group, and then we're going to talk about the timeline. So I'm going to ask the chair if she would propose a potential membership, not names, but kind of how would you foresee the makeup of this group, numbers wise? And then we'll open this up.
You put me on the spot there, Steve. I think we want to make sure we can have a group that when working groups get too large, it could slow down the progress, but I think we want to have representatives from the board. There probably need to be some administration there as well as DAE. So I'm thinking 12 to 14. Looking at my colleagues. 12 to 14 members.
Well, let's try to be a little bit more specific, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
All right.
So how many board members? I am putting you on the spot.
You are
because
putting me
you're
on the
chair,
spot.
and there's two reasons I'm putting you on the chair.
Okay.
One, you're the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you're awesome.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So can you say how many school board members you would we don't have to stick with this, but
yeah, let's
help. I'm trying to move us towards trying to land the plane, as I said.
Right.
So let's give us a number.
I'll say two.
Two
We'll
board
have
members.
one alternative board member.
Two board members and one alternate.
I'd like to have two administration.
Two administration.
And how many am I left? 8. So we would need, I think we could have 4 of those, the DAE, and 4 of those other employees. Did I do that math right?
That's 13, or that's 12 plus the alternate. Yeah.
Okay.
Discussion by the board, and then we'll also hear from DAE. Anybody want to start off, or shall I hear from DAE first? Anybody on the board have any comments? Let me ask the board. Okay. Thoughts from DAE folks?
Is there like 4 organizations that are accountable to a base? Because when we have 4 folks, it'll be for folks that are accountable to an organization? Is it for individuals, for folks who are representing some other group of folks that have democratic process? Like what is that?
So be looking for 4 individuals that represent other folks, school system employees. And I think this is why I think some of the information that we would need around membership would be helpful, because we want to make sure that we're getting a group that's representative of the district as much as we can.
Riley, did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to ask a follow-up. When we say represent, right, we're talking about elections, like we talked about with accountability. When you say represent, do you just mean like y'all are choosing someone? Who's choosing them?
Yeah, so the board has policy around making choices for folks on the committee. We've done this before with many of the committees like strategic plan, LGBTQIA committee, all of that. So the board can go through a process to make sure those folks are chosen to be a part of the group.
Other comments from board members?
I think it's a good place to start. I think with all Durham things, we can kind of adapt as we go. I think the chair has that authority, right?
We certainly can.
Emily?
I do think we should have majority DAE, or have all DAE membership. And I think they brought the policy to us, and I do think the question of inclusivity is really important, and the group should wrestle with it. I would like to hear like from the people who walked out, why did they walk out? Like, what is their, what are, why aren't people, they may be able to share their perspectives, but why what are reasons that people don't feel like DAE represents them? And I would favor I respect the work of reaching out to so many, such a high percentage of our staff overall. And so I think it's important to represent that in the group. So I would say I'm not gonna, I mean, that's what I think. I think it should be.
I think you were at the
mostly
point where that we're at the point now where we're really getting down to brass tacks. So I think if you have an alternative recommendation about the balance between DAE members and other members, you need to make it. And so what would that be?
That's great, Steve. Push us on details.
I think that's why you hired me.
Yes. Usually I feel like I'm that person, but so we have 14. We said 2 board members, 2 admin.
12, but you.
Oh, we're at 12. All right, sorry.
Go ahead. 12.
Okay. And then so then you're getting 8.
It was 4 DAE and 4 other is what Bettina had proposed.
I don't know how those others would be chosen necessarily. Like if anything, I would propose 6. If we're gonna say 8 additional people, 6 DAE, 2 from other groups. But I also don't know how we would necessarily select those individuals. And or I would say 8 people from DAE, and then this group wrestles with that question. And so yeah, I mean, kind of want more information from the people who aren't in the room. But
I
yeah.
think you were out, you had to step out, and the majority of the board kind of felt differently. And so I just want to make sure to reflect that we're all wrestling with at least starting with more inclusivity. And that's what I heard from the majority of folks when you stepped out.
I watched it too, so I heard it.
She's on it. I am not okay at this point, as I've said, with excluding folks. I get why I get the reasons why you want that right now. I hear that. We're just talking about the next meeting. And so I think we need to remember we're just talking about the next meeting. I would be fine and even in favor of a plan where there is more representation from DAE, because y'all have done the hard work of organizing and you do represent many, many of our employees. more representation from DAE than from other folks. And I do agree, it's difficult to decide who those other folks are, but I don't feel comfortable at this point not allowing them to have a seat at this one next meeting. Just because something's difficult doesn't mean that we shouldn't allow it to happen.
Jessica,
and
I'm
figure out how
gonna
to
try
do
to
that.
push you in the same way that I just was talking to Emily. She's proposed 6-2. There's 4-4 on the table. What, do you have a number in mind?
5-3.
Okay, like King Solomon. All right, let's, any other comments from board members at this point? If not, I'm going to try to get us to a decision point. Any final comment before we get to that decision point from any DAE folks?
I have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Bettina. You stated that this ad hoc committee is chosen by the board, so you would individually pick what DA members would be a part of that ad hoc committee. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, no, I would not. I would ask Simone to send me recommendations of who would be. The board has to make the final decision, right? The board has to approve, but we do ask for recommendations. And so I would ask for some recommendations.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Anything else from DAE folks? Okay. So, there are 3 things on the table here, friends, and I think now is the time that I will accept a motion. One recommendation is that there be 4 DAE, 4 other, 2 administrators, 2 board members, and an alternate. One is that they split between DAE and other members be 6-2, one that it be 5-3. I'm happy to accept a motion at this time.
Can I still ask a question before we do that?
Sure.
How would we choose the non-DAE individuals?
So we would need to think about that as a board. In the past, when we have a committee that we want to seat, for lack of better words, we ask for recommendations from the board. We bring those recommendations forward to the meeting and make a decision. Because we're talking about this pretty quickly, we could talk about if we want to have an application or something like that. There are many ways that we could go about it. But that would be my thoughts so far.
Could I ask a question about that? It is part of that application, like I hear y'all wanting to hear our numbers about representation, and as part of the application, some kind of demonstration of their representation and accountability to a base.
So in the past, we've had an application. I don't know that we would have one now, right? Because we want to make sure this committee can get started on February 22nd. I think what I'm also hearing is like DAE has a structure for accountability, and you're asking what would our structure be for other employees and accountability. And what I think we're asking for though is for inclusivity for all of our workers to be at the table. And so I think feels like we're missing each other maybe on that. But I think that feels like the kind of rubric that we're operating off of. We want to have inclusivity of our workers. Is that? Yeah.
I make the motion that we start the ad hoc committee with membership for 4 employees, 4 from DAE, 4 from outside of DAE.
Second.
Thank you. There was a second to that. Okay. Any discussion, board members? All right. We don't have anything to push here.
Discussion.
I'm sorry.
I do.
Nelson.
That's my fault for missing that. I'm sorry. So I know that that's not exciting for y'all, but I know that when I found out that it would be 14 of you around this table, it felt intimidating for it to be double y'all and 7 of us. And I know that seems unfair because of our proximity to power, but we only have the ability to influence it. It takes 4 of us or more to make a decision for this board. And so it feels helpful to hear from an even number of members from outside of the DAE community.
I also just had a comment that I'd like to see turquoise at the table. And I'm glad you spoke tonight. I'm sorry I went over to you and talked to you and said, please tell me what's going on, and you're like, no, you're proud of all your teammates. You're a team player, but your voice is important. People have mentioned that a lot of the reason why they're joining DAE is because of the work that you've done. You've shown out in community. You've fed children. You are an educator who puts children first, and you go out of your way to build coalition and get people to feed the children and take care of them. And you have been teacher of the year. You've done so many things. You've been featured everywhere. And so a lot of people say they join DAE because they see you and they know the work you've done. So I want to see you at the table as well. It's not a motion, but I'm just saying tonight I got a little worried when I didn't hear your voice at all, you know? So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments before we vote? Jessica?
Just one more. Just to remember that like this is an advisory group, right? So the point, like it's so that folks, we can hear from y'all. And then as y'all have stated, like we still have to make the decisions, right? So is there harm in, at least to start for our next meeting, hearing from just more voices? We understand the weight that y'all bring and the weight of the voice of DAE, but I don't think it hurts to hear from more voices. Again, if what we're doing is just hearing.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ronnie, are you ready? Ready to go? Good, thank you. All right, there's a motion on the floor that the makeup of the working group that will move ahead with consideration of meet and confer be 2 board members, 1 alternate, 2 administrators, 4 DAE members, and 4 other employees. I'm going to ask all in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. All opposed? Okay. The motion passes 6-1. We'll now move to discussion of a timeline. I'm going to ask Natalie, because I know she has thoughts about this timeline, to offer one.
I'm actually the worst person with calendars. I do think in talking with DAE leadership before that you all were planning to bring this in the spring, and those conversations would have started in the spring. So I could see this starting March and moving into April, and seeing where we get. We know that our budget season is May 15th is the date for us. So I think that March, April, May seems like the best timeline for getting stuff kicked off while we still respect all the ongoing work to do.
Let me just ask a question about that. Are you saying that be a little more explicit about what you think would happen when? I mean, you don't have to. Somebody else can do it, but what are your thoughts?
I think this group gathers, is appointed at, Bettina, do you think you could appoint within the next meeting or the following meeting? That needs to be the kickoff start, right?
It would.
And so then it could meet every other week after that until it's enjoying itself as much as ad hoc committees do. That's how I'm thinking of it. It goes as long as it needs to. It stops whenever it is done, right?
Yeah.
It's not a forever thing. It's bringing best practices together.
March 7th is what you're looking at, Ms. Byer?
Sounds right.
That's a work session. We could appoint, you're saying appoint the committee at that point?
Yep.
Point on March the 7th, is that what you said, or 2nd? I'm sorry.
7th.
7th. Okay. So before I get other thoughts from board members, I think I'll ask the folks from DAE their thoughts. And Quentin, I realize I said I was going to come back to you earlier and I didn't. Apologies. DAE folks would like to respond about the schedule.
I think what we have seen in the thousands of conversations that we've had with our coworkers over the past couple of weeks is this is not only a crisis, but this particular process feels fairly urgent to them. Urgent enough that they were willing to take days of protest to try to make it happen. And I am curious to know if that timeline will feel like the sense of urgency that they are asking for in the moment.
Just to build on that, right? There's two problems with that timeline. One, we're in the worst crisis of broken trust that I've ever seen in the district, anyone's ever seen that I've spoken to. And two, it puts us on a timeline that y'all are doing the budget without workers at the table, precisely why this urgency came about in the first place before the pay debacle. So folks wanted a seat at the table for workers when we make these giant decisions about our lives for next year, and you're, slow rolling, we're taking our time with it. I get that it takes time under normal circumstances. These aren't normal circumstances. So, yeah, the urgency, I would say, from conversations I've had in the field with all these workers is not even close to what urgency workers want to see. And that's, again, going back to an accountable base of work, like through an accountability structure to a base of workers.
Any other comments from DAE members? Okay, board members, comments?
I hear that. I want us to remember that we have to follow policy, and we can't meet sooner than we can meet and sooner than we can notice the meetings. And we have to give our administration time to figure out all the technicalities of setting up such a meeting and making sure that they have their representatives there and carry on the business of the district. And we need your help in carrying on the business of the district. So I don't know how we move any faster than that.
I want to make a suggestion. February 22nd is the next meeting, and I think you could appoint, you all could recommend 4 people in that timeline, and you could appoint 4 people in that timeline. That doesn't seem impossible. It seems urgent, but I'm hearing from the folks around the table, and I believe there is urgency in the district. That would get it started quicker. And then I think the other thing that I think is that I hear you about the work gets done when it's done, but I also think that having a time that the board is aiming to vote on a policy would help the group do its work in a fashion that would be efficient. And so that's a thought I have.
Whatever the ad hoc committee comes back with, we need to, as with all policies, check in with our chief of staff, our attorneys, and make sure that what we're implementing is within the law of the North Carolina, right? So that's gonna take some time. I don't disagree with doing it February 22nd, making the recommendations.
This is not, I just object to the characterization as a slow roll. This is not a slow roll. This is democracy. All of our meetings are open to you all. Y'all can come tell us over and over how we're doing the wrong thing. I mean, we're here to hear all of that. February 22nd, composing an ad hoc group, great. And then that group can meet at the most weekly. I don't think it needs to meet twice a week. I don't think this is the most urgent thing in this community. And we look forward to continuing to find this way and other ways to engage with our workers, both those within DAE and everyone else. That's not a slow roll. The way you all message things, the way you all use language like demand, this is a demand. We are Durham folks coming together in a crisis. And I implore you to continue to help us lead forward. It's not a slow roll.
I have a comment. The other thing is that Natalie, what you shared, 6 of these seats you endorsed. You endorsed Giovanni, you endorsed Emily, you endorsed Bettina, you endorsed Natalie, you endorsed Millicent, and you endorsed Jessica. I mean, they endorsed you, right? Yeah. I mean, I know you were appointed. She's running now, but You did not endorse my seat, but technically you could claim 6 seats right here. You have stood behind. You have said these are representatives you believe in, right? So 6 out of 6 to 1. You have relationships with board members, and we want to again highlight the importance of relationship. Transactional endeavors, we have seen some of those dynamics playing out. I want to let you all know we are actively working every single day. There's not a day that goes by that we're not actually working on this. But, you know, I just want the community to also know as we work on this, we want to have conversations that will allow us to be more accountable, more transparent. Transparency is key. I agree with the comment about we are in a moment of building trust, but I also want to remind you, 6 of these seats you endorsed. You could say that I'm the only one standing in the way. I'm not. But again, 6 of these seats you endorsed. And this is also a time to have this relationship and to figure out how to have these conversations as we move forward to crafting the details of what's going to happen in these ad hoc committee meetings.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll accept a motion now about the timeline. Yeah.
Question, the biggest question I'm going to go get when I go back to my building tomorrow. Some from classified coworkers who are currently working their second or third job, which is why they can't be here tonight, is what's going to happen with the March paychecks. Is this timeline going to be able to give worker input on the March paychecks? I think we all know how people will feel if it doesn't. But if we have worker voice and input, people can feel a lot better about any changes that are made in their pay.
Can I don't, my understanding is this work group is to create the policy. So I don't know that I don't see there being budget conversations in this small group. If we talk about it, I don't know, a different way of having input or something like that, but that's my understanding of what we just voted on. And so I think, and then the other thing is that the board's goal is to vote on a decision for March paychecks and going the rest of the academic year on next Thursday. So we still welcome, you know, input and the existing ways that exist or existing, you know what I'm trying to say, opportunities that we have, but yeah, that's what I think we're talking about. So I don't, and maybe that's something to clarify what this work group would discuss in the coming weeks. But my understanding is that they would be discussing the policy, crafting the policy, and then bringing it to the board for approval of the policy. So if we have different understandings, we should discuss that too.
Thank you. All right. Can I have a motion on the timeline?
I move that we appoint members to the ad hoc committee at our February 22nd meeting. Second.
You can do it if you want to. It has been moved and seconded that the group that the chair appoints. You make all the appointments. That the chair appoints the members to the ad hoc committee and the February 22nd meeting of the board. Is there a second? I'm sorry, it was a second. I apologize.
Second again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. I forgot how to do this. Yeah, I used to do this all the time. I was really good at it once. Okay, all in favor of that, please raise their hand. Okay, that passes unanimously. Do you all want to say anything else about a timeline? Giovanni?
Just to level set, Riley, you made a comment about the budget that's coming up. There's practices that are already in place, right? And we've lost trust. And you want to make sure your voices are heard. So those are things too that doesn't behoove me as well. So in looking at our process with the budget, a lot's going to be coming out in general. There's public comments for the budget. There's what's it called, public hearing, and opportunities. But before we even get there, I want to make sure that you're hearing me. We want to have these conversations. Meet and confer. Emily was clarifying, we're working on a policy, the work group is working on a policy, and we're in the midst of the budget coming up, right? So tell us, give me a suggestion. What does that look like before this policy is in place? Because we're in budget season, right? I want to have that discussion too. What solutions for the here and now in this system that we already have in place, as we have in budgets before? It was the DAE president, met with the superintendent. We're in influx right now. We're working hard to get through the March pay and the rest of this year. So I just want to make sure that you all know that from me, and I'm thinking my board also wants to make sure we're getting your input about the budget.
Thank you. All right, any other comments, any other decisions y'all want to make about a timeline? Okay. The last item on the agenda is board members, any additional comments? I'm going to discourage this unless you feel the absolute need to make a comment. It won't hurt my feelings or
Can I
anything.
just make one quick comment? I think this is a historic meeting. It's never happened before, so we need to celebrate the fact that this is a historic moment, that we're sitting at a table having this conversation. Two, I want to be really clear about, like, we talked a little bit about accountability, transparency, and narrative. So I would not want to hear that people feel like the board is slow rolling the conversation, right? We moved our timeline, and this is not to put someone on the spot. We moved it from March 7th to February 22nd. We are going to work really hard over the next couple of days to figure out a process for getting people on this committee. And then the committee, I heard from people say, we can meet weekly to work on this. So, like, the board is working. I need that to be the conversation that we're having. We want to meet and figure it out. And we also are respectful of all the other things that are happening around us in our community. And so I want to be clear about, like, that's how we're leaving this meeting. We've done some really good work today, and there's more work to do moving forward for us to figure out the collaboration between the board, the administration, and all the educators that work for our public school system.
I just want to say I think those are really important comments. I think the message that you all take back is really significant. I think I want to say that I really appreciate the work of the board tonight. You all did some great thinking. I know you listened incredibly intensely with open ears and open hearts, and I really appreciate that. To the folks from DAE, thank you so much for the work you've done to get us here. It's incredible work. It's absolutely incredible work. And you're doing it at the same time when you're teaching school or you're being an instructional assistant, all the things that you all are doing. I cannot express enough on behalf of our whole community the gratitude that we have towards you all, the work that you do. I feel a lot of confidence that the board will move this process forward in good faith. And that it's going to be really important that you all that you all are at the table in that same good faith, and I know that you will be. I do, before we, one of the things we haven't talked about tonight, and on purpose, is kind of the legal aspect of this. You will see to my right, the attorney, both for the school board and for the DAE, are sitting there enjoying themselves. They've probably been eating potato chips and so forth. But I appreciate them. They are going to be working together in a way that lawyers do to figure out the legalities and how this can be made legal. Okay. I also want to thank Nicole, Sheena, Crystal. Thank you all for being here and for making this meeting happen. We were, great job. Much appreciation for you all. Thank you so much. And I'll say again, I was so not necessary. I mean, we have an absolutely fantastic board chair, so don't invite me again. All right. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate all of you all so much. And you have to say this meeting's adjourned.
Yeah, we are adjourned.